We are back, boys. We are back with Season 2 of Revenge of the Iron-Blooded Sword Hound. We begin this season on the day when people flock to the City of Water, Vicier. It is the capital city of the great empire, Rock. The day of Colosseo Academy's entrance ceremony, the world's most prestigious university where our boy, Vikir, will be attending. As usual, the first day is buzzing with the Academy's club recruitments. Freshmen and seniors of the school are all mixed together. The seniors are seen talking to every freshman that walked by their club stall, trying their best to recruit them. Even asking for a moment to fill surveys, and revealing that all they needed was to stamp their fingerprint and register their seals to join their recruitment form. The seniors were already feeling the heat as the freshman recruitment was more competitive than last year. Another senior reveals that the reason behind that was because of this year's freshmen for both the Fire Corps and Ice Corps, which were no joke at all. In this prestigious school, there are two classes in the academy. The first one being the Ice Corps, who are the members that specialize in swords, bows, spears and more. Whereas, the Fire Corps were the members who specialize in magic. Comment below which side you would join if you were a part of the school. Me, personally, Ice Corps, because of our boy Vikir and the Fang techniques. Moving on, in their 4 years, besides specializing in those fields, the students also learn all sorts of general knowledge. The seniors had a list filled with the freshmen who were all gaining everyone's attention right now. The first target of the seniors was a blonde kid called Tudor, who comes from the Don Quixote family, who are famous for their spearmanship. The second target amongst the freshmen was a purple-haired girl called Bianca, who came from the Usher family, not our Usher who sang Somebody to Love with Justin Bieber, but from a family that is famous for their bowmanship. Tudor and Bianca were the freshmen who were tied in first place during the Ice Corps practical exam, and are the first on the most desired people list. After them are our favorite triplets, taking 3rd, 4th and 5th place, are the Baskerville triplets from the Iron-Blood Swordsman family. Since they were a part of the Baskerville family, the seniors knew that no further explanation was needed in introducing them. And finally, introducing another new character to the series, we have one person who has been gaining all the attention in the Fire Corps. An extremely talented freshman, by the name of Sinclair, who has ash-gray hair. She was ranked 1st in the practical test and 2nd in the theory test. Her outstanding grades were recorded. And lastly, the man we have been waiting for months, the person, whose name turns out to be the #1 student who came 1st in the theory exam. Vikir, who kind of looks like a nerd right now. We are now faced with a new look, Vikir with glasses. Comment below what you would rate his current look out of 10 right now. As our boy walked through the stalls of the school, he overhears the seniors talking about how there was no need to recruit the nerd that came in 1st during the theory exam, since they were confident that he would be the type of newbie that will ruin the club's atmosphere. Plus, there were also more than 10 other freshmen who had the same name as Vikir, which would make it troublesome for them to find him. After hearing the seniors speaking about him, Vikir had a nervous sweat drop dripping down the side of his face. In order not to draw attention in the academy, he had ditched the Baskerville surname and entered as a commoner, but he still didn't think it was possible that he would still draw so much attention. Vikir had heard that it's more difficult to enter the academy as a commoner, so it seems like doing well in the theory exam instead of the practical backfired on him. So now, he needed to do his best to avoid attention, in order to move around comfortably and to do the things he needed. But as he walked through the clubs, our boy was being closely followed by the triplet hounds, who were determined to protect their master. After walking for some time around the clubs, a loud commotion of students shouting for a senior to look at them catches his attention. A familiar blonde-haired student was being swarmed by everyone, shouting at her that they were huge fans, and some even claimed to have entered the school just to meet her. They couldn't believe the holiness that was coming out of her and that her beauty was something out of this world. It turns out to be Dolores Lune Quo Vadis, the priestess that Vikir had met during his Assassin's Creed days. She was nervous, being surrounded by a huge crowd of students, so she politely told them to calm down. It turns out that she was school president and vice president of the newspaper club. As she questions the crowd of students about whether they were interested in joining her newspaper club, one of them shouts with a reply that they were only interested in her. Vikir silently watches her from the back, slowly remembering that Dolores was the school president, and someone that he needed to avoid as much as possible. Even though he was hiding his presence, Dolores still somehow manages to sense our boy's aura, turning in the right direction, just in time to see him leaving the area silently. We now turn to see the academy's dorm rooms, where Vikir would be staying. He stands in front of a room's door, wondering if this was it. But as he thinks about it, another person approaches him, asking Vikir if the room he was standing outside of was his. The person was excited to finally meet his roommate, catching Vikir's attention. Vikir's roommate turns out to be a young-looking boy, with a bowl haircut, who introduces himself as PG. Vicier was stunned by the excitement coming out from PG, as our boy actually remembers him from his previous life. Before Vicier had regressed, PG was always a kind guy who helped him and gave him things, while he was here to support the triplets. But Vicier also remembered that PG was being bullied by his wicked roommate back then. Which was the start of the numerous misfortunes that would eventually lead to his end. As they entered the room together, Vicier hoped silently, in his heart, that whatever happened back then, wouldn't come back to this lifetime. PG was excited, informing Vicier that he could choose any bunk bed that he wanted in the room. He even asks our boy if he was going to the freshman welcome party after dinner. Sensing that it was a stupid question, PG reveals that the party wasn't compulsory but all the freshmen would be going there, since if he couldn't get close with his peers or seniors, he expected that their 4 years in school would be difficult. But Vicier replies with a simple nope, I'm not going. Which leaves PG in a completely shocked state. He tries his best to change Vicier's mind about not going, warning him that if he doesn't, the seniors will single him out, and that will eventually lead him to become a loner amongst his peers. He doesn't stop there, he even tells Vicier that a lot of their distinguished seniors were going to come to this orientation. Even the Saintess Dolores was coming too. He also mentions their peers, Tudor, the eldest son of Don Quixote, and Bianca, the eldest daughter of the Usher family, which Vicier should have heard about. But that's not all, he even mentions that the Baskerville's triplets were coming, who were all talented. Along with, somebody called Sancho from the North Mercenary Guild, who rejected the top spot at Varangian to come to their school instead. He finally mentions Sinclair, the student who passed the exam with the highest score at the Magic Tower, and who also came in first for the Fire Corps. Vicier couldn't help but be overwhelmed by the sudden information bomb that came from PG. In his mind, he recalls that PG was also great at collecting and analyzing information in his previous life too. After bombarding Vicier with all the knowledge in his tiny head, PG hopes that it changes his decision about not going. But our boy was cold as ice, replying back with the same old answer, a simple nope. Bringing horror and shock to PG's face as he wonders why Vicier still wouldn't go, even after knowing about what would happen to him. But our boy doesn't care, turning around to leave and explaining that he just didn't want to go. He waves PG goodbye and tells him to have fun, leaving him stunned but impressed, as PG vowed to be as cool as Vicier one day. Deep within the night as the moon shines brightly, a familiar figure stood high above on the roof of a building, basking in the moonlight. Down below where he stood, a small hint of light could be seen in the alleyways between the buildings. A group of thugs were gathered around a barrel used for fire. The one sitting on the bench was arguing to his two companions, saying that he was relieved that he didn't have to hear those children whining anymore. He continues to complain to them, revealing that all their storerooms had been filled with children recently, making the other two wonder why all the children were coming to them and that a carriage had arrived at dawn and taken all of them. One of them heard that the children they had taken were all headed to an orphanage in Quo Vadis, but the thug sitting on the bench warns him to not say anything more, since curiosity kills the cat. As they were talking, another person approached them, with blades on his back. He orders them to stop chit-chatting amongst themselves and to stand guard properly, if they want to get properly paid for their useless existence. Ouch, talk about a mean boss. This man with slashes down his eyes and his tongue sticking out is called Ron Batison, nicknamed the Flesh Grinder. The thugs were obviously afraid of him as he walked past them. He continued to trash talk them, literally calling them pieces of trash and telling them that they don't possess any fighting spirit. He knew that as a graduator, these pieces of trash, who were low-rank mercenaries, without an ounce of mana in their bodies, could never do anything against him. Ron continues to wonder to himself if there was anyone strong that he could slice up, but as he was talking to himself, a familiar voice asks him if his name was Ron Batison. Thinking that it was one of the low-ranked mercenaries who dares to speak his name with their weak lips, he immediately grabs onto his sword to give him a spanking. But upon turning around, he finds all three of them completely knocked out around the barrel of fire. The man started to feel afraid, as he didn't even hear a single sound from when they were knocked out. The voice continues to speak to him, revealing his full name to be Ron Humbert Batison. Recounting that 4 years ago, he had killed his neighboring family and used them as sacrifices, while contracting with a known demon. The voice continues to recall Ron's history. After sacrificing the family, he had joined the Northern Guild Association, and had gathered information to give to the demon he contracted with. As the final nail to the coffin, the voice reveals that Ron had extracted information from the Mankind Allied Forces. While he was on guard duty, he used a hand mirror and revealed the location of the platoon's camp. Even after hearing all the things he had done, Ron tells the voice to stop saying useless things and to show himself instead. Agreeing with his request, our boy finally makes his appearance in his Assassin's Creed outfit, right behind Ron. Revealing that because of Ron, the alley platoon was slaughtered. Finally sensing that someone was behind him, Ron didn't reply back, but simply swung his twin swords as hard as he could at where Vikir was standing. He thought he had felt the sensation of cutting something, which made him confused as it was too easy. It turns out to be true, because in the next moment, both of Ron's arms were sliced away from his shoulder in a second, before he could even respond to the attack. Vikir is already done with him as he returns Beelzebub back into his hand, after appearing behind Ron once again and slicing both of his arms instantly, leaving Ron on the ground, crying and screaming in pain over the loss of his arms. He starts to beg for mercy, telling Vikir that he didn't know about the Mankind Allied forces, which made him wonder why he was doing this to him. Our boy simply replies that Ron didn't know about it, because it hadn't happened yet. He holds Ron by his hair, and stares right into his soul, revealing that he knows that he had contracted with a demon, and wants the information on the contracted demon. But as soon as Ron starts to speak, telling Vikir about how he didn't know, the shape of his face starts to twist and bend, in an ugly way. The next thing Vikir knew, Ron's face had become all swollen and exploded into a bloody mess. Looking at the current state of Ron, Vikir noted that another one had died with their head exploding. He then takes out a notebook, with words written on the pages, some were covered in a black stroke line. With a bloody finger, Vikir crosses out another name with the blood, noting that Ron makes the third in the row. It turns out that the book our boy is holding is called The Blacklist. This was something that was created with the memories of his past life and with the help of Cindy's investigation. The Blacklist contains information about the demon worshippers who sided with the demons and betrayed mankind. Before the time of the fall, Vikir needed to kill them all. He recalled that the 3 demon worshippers he encountered so far had all died with their heads exploding before he could kill them. Thinking about it deeply, Vikir concluded that this was the demon's skill. Which means that the demon they contracted with was hiding within the capital. And that it was one of the 10 elite corpses who had done the contracting with the humans. As we continued into the night, the bell of a church started to ring. With each chime, the sounds of slashing were hidden. We turned to a random building in the town, where Vikir stood near the balcony. Behind him were endless amounts of bodies, each having a part of their body sliced off, their blood splattered everywhere, from the floors to the walls and to the ceilings. Absorbing Beelzebub back into his hand, Vikir wonders if the amount of demon worshippers he had slain so far had reached number 29. Based on everything so far, he concluded that they were either dead, or if they mentioned the demon they had a contract with, their heads would explode. Which makes it look like a condition of the demon contract. Crossing out the names in his blacklist with a pen this time, Vikir noted that he wasn't able to get any information about the elite corpse's location, which means that this was going to be a long and excruciating fight for him. In the end, he didn't expect to get anything on his first day. As the night continues, Vikir wonders if he should return to the academy right now. And so our boy leaps across the roofs of the town's buildings, eventually crossing over the walls of the academy. As he lands on the branch of a tree, he gazes into a well-lit room. Staring deep within, Vikir could see that the freshman welcome party was still ongoing. As he leaps down from the tree, and dusts the dirt off his pants, our boy wears his nerd disguise once again. Thinking that he should stop by at the party just in case. Inside the freshman welcome party, the students were happily talking to one another and eating the food from the buffet table. Even the triplets were enjoying themselves, chugging down huge cups of beer all at once, leaving everyone around them impressed. Dolores was once again surrounded by her fans, who screamed at her, proclaiming their love for her. Tudor was surrounded by the ladies while Bianca was pouring glasses of wine for her seniors as a sign of respect. Vicier stood alone in the back, analyzing the situation. He notices Tudor and Bianca in the party. He didn't know that they were in the same year as him. In his previous life, the great heroes who led mankind to victory with Karmas morgue during the time of the fall. One of them was the person who stood at the front line of the battlefield and took charge, from one of the 7 greatest families, the Azure Spearman family, Don Quixote's genius. Tudor La Mancha Don Quixote, the blonde playboy right now. And the archer who defeated countless demons, from one of the 7 greatest families, the mystical Archer family, Usher's genius, not Justin Bieber, but Bianca Faux Usher. Besides those two, Vicier was able to recognize a lot of faces he saw on the battlefield. He smiles to himself over this sight, as he didn't expect that he would see them like this. But as he looks around the party again, he wonders if Karmas morgue had entered the academy too. But as he did, PG was shaking as someone asked if they should get some music going. It turns out that PG was being bullied by a senior who was forcing him to sing right now. Vicier could spot our little boy surrounded by a whole group of seniors that were bigger than him. As he refused to sing, a female senior approaches him this time, bringing along a massive jug of alcohol and telling PG that if he doesn't want to sing, then he has to drink this entire cup in one go. Tears started to form around his eyes as PG questioned the senior about how he was going to drink all of it. But the seniors didn't care about what he was feeling, repeating to PG that he should just drink. Sensing that he couldn't back away from their request, after all, they were his seniors, our little man decided to do as they wanted. And begins to chug down the massive jug of alcohol they had brought for him in one go. As he continued to try his best to drink most of it, the seniors were laughing at him, and mocking PG by telling him that he was doing a good job. But before he could finish all of it, he threw up on the floor. Instead of helping him, the seniors continued to make fun of PG, calling him a crazy bastard for vomiting, which they found disgusting. As he tries his best to catch his breath, PG could hear the seniors making up a new nickname for him. They decided to call him the Vomit Pig. In his time of need, a hero appears. Our boy, Vikir, uses his own cape to cover the vomit that was on the floor, surprising the seniors. As they wondered who this nerdy boy was in front of them. Vikir looks over to PG, deep in thought. Thinking about him in his previous life, Vikir knew that PG had dropped out of school because he couldn't endure the bullying. Instead of graduating, he had become a low-ranked government official and lived a tough life while looking after his parents. The next time Vikir had met PG was when they were at the front line of the war, after the time of the fall had started. PG was one of the few people who had the balls to volunteer to go to the front lines. With his amazing strategy and information analysis, he had saved multiple lives. One of those lives was our boy, Vikir. It turns out that this little man was one of the few people that Vikir had respected as a friend. Still stunned upon seeing Vikir, our boy tells him to return to the dorm room first, as he was going to take care of things here. Vikir couldn't just stand idly by while his friend gets humiliated. A senior places his hand onto Vikir's shoulder, asking him about what he was doing and if he was crazy for interrupting a senior when they were talking. The senior takes it a step further, slapping Vikir's face repeatedly till it turns red, asking our boy if he was PG's classmate from Ice Corps Class B, after seeing our boy arrogantly step in like he was confident. But this senior made a huge mistake, as the triplets of the Baskerville clan finally made their appearance once again. All three of them had their eyes lit up with bloodhound aura, fueled by anger, as they witnessed the senior slapping their master. Vikir was still calm and collected. As he pushed his glasses up, his own pair of bloodhound eyes started to light up as he stared at them. The triplets immediately calmed down after recalling the warning they had received from Vikir. He told them before that he was going as a commoner at the academy, and that he would kill them the moment they reveal his identity. A female senior joins in, telling her friend that they shouldn't be rough on the freshmen and instead, they should treat them nicely as their seniors. She then comes up with a nice idea, saying that it would do the trick for them. She offers Vikir a chance. The seniors were willing to let both of them go, if he could drink all of the alcohol that was in the jug in front of them. Not wanting to pull our boy into his problems, PG tells Vikir that he was actually fine, but he ignores his words, and without hesitating, grabs onto the jug of alcohol. And started to pour it down his throat, surprising everyone around him. The female senior was giggling to herself, knowing that the jug was a mixed drink with high alcohol content, containing vodka and rum. So she was confident that there was no way a human could drink more than 1 liter of it at once. But she underestimates our boy, as he continues to chug down the drink without stopping, leaving the seniors all stunned and shocked. After some time, he slams the empty jug onto a nearby table, wiping off the remains on his mouth. Without wasting any more time, Vikir grabs onto PG and leaves with him, simply telling the seniors that were stunned by what they just saw, a single word, bye. But before they could leave peacefully, the same senior that was slapping Vikir's face grabs onto his shoulder, telling him to wait. The moment he does, Tudor and Bianca were the first to experience a horrifying and powerful feeling crushing them. The aura that our boy had been hiding up to now. With an ice-cold stare, and his eyes lit up, Vikir looks at the senior, asking him if he wanted anything else. But the senior was too stunned to speak, shaking from head to toe as his mouth was left wide open. That's when Dolores makes her appearance, asking everyone present about why it was so chaotic over here. The seniors were quick to cover their tracks, telling her that a freshman had vomited and that they were going to take care of it. Dolores senses something was wrong, and warns them that they couldn't treat the freshmen cruelly as they needed to uphold the image of the academy. Seeing that she was taking care of things from here on, Vikir hurries away with PG in his arms. The triplets on the other hand were impressed by their master, after witnessing the things he had done, giving him 3 thumbs up and calling him cool. Tudor and Bianca were both staring in the same direction, and thinking that they were mistaken about what they felt earlier on. But another student with white hair stood between them, smiling to herself over and was impressed by something. Her eyes were sparkling as her face was filled with blush. It turns out to be Sinclair, the freshman who ranked first in the Ice Core practical exam and ranked second in the theory exam. She watches closely as Vikir leaves the party with PG, thinking to herself that she had found someone nice. After the incident at the freshman welcome party, we come to the next day, where at the academy, the Ice and Fire Corps attend classes together. Through this method, a competitive structure is created for the confident elites. This increases focus among students and it is the academy's policy. The man who looks like Professor Snape from Harry Potter closes the book in his hand, which marks the end of his lecture on the culture of the barbarian tribe. This Snape wannabe is the combat theory professor known as Vicier Morgue, from the Morgue family. As he continues to talk to the students, he asks them a question, which causes most of them to avoid eye contact with him in order not to catch his attention. The professor states that with the basis of the discovered locations of the barbarian tribe, he wanted to ask if there was anyone in the classroom who would like to tell him about the barbarians' hypothesized location of their stronghold. Even Tudor, who belonged to the Ice Corps and was ranked first in the practical exam, had some trouble with the professor's question. He looks through his notes, thinking about the location of the clash between the barbarians and the Empire, which was at the South Region's front in Highland, 1, 8 and 75. But there were more places that he struggles to remember. Bianca, who is also a part of the Ice Corps and tied with Tudor in placing first in the practical exam, struggles with the question. Thinking about it deeply, she knew that the areas where the Empire and the Balak tribe clashed were all in low-altitude locations, and considering that it was a trough, she concluded that the barbarians' tribe's stronghold would be in a region with low altitude as well. But as the two people who ranked first in the practical exam struggled to come up with an answer, Sinclair bursts in, raising her hand high in the air while radiating a bright aura all around her, catching everyone's attention as she screams at the top of her lungs that she was going to answer. Sinclair belongs to the Fire Corps, is currently ranked first in their practical exam, and ranked second in the theory exam. Looking at the student who happily raised her hand to answer, Professor Vicier concluded that she was Sinclair, ranked first of the Fire Corps, and told her to go ahead and reveal her answer to everyone in class. Sinclair spoke about how in the military, according to the published academia, the location of the close fight between the barbarian tribe and the Empire were in Highlands 1, 4, 5, 7, 8, 30, 75, and 207. She also spoke about how excluding the 8th Highland, which is on a high mountain peak, all of the areas were in troughs. With all that information, as she continued on with her answer, Vicier was spotted, sitting one row behind her. But his eyes were closed as PG stared at him. Instead of sleeping, Vicier was deep in thought. Going through his mind were the events of last night. Yesterday marked the 29 times he had slain demon worshippers in the city. Something they had in common was that they all possessed a severe stench of demons, and before they died, their so-called faces exploded into a bloody mess each time. Face and explode. With these two facts, Vicier thought that if that was the skill of the elite corpse that was hiding in this capital city, then there was only place he could think of that it would be hiding itself in. He concluded that he needed to ask Cindy for her help in investigating the area around the place he had in mind, but as he was thinking, PG immediately calls out to Vicier, tapping onto his shoulder in order to grab his attention. Upon opening his eyes, our boy could see that everyone in the class had their eyes focused on him. Professor Snape was furious, stating that the Ice Corps weren't as good as the Fire Corps, as he couldn't believe that there was a student who would dare sleep in the first class of the semester. Flexing his glasses, Vicier responds back to the professor, telling him that he wasn't sleeping. His reply shocked PG. Upset over our boy's arrogant reply, the professor grew even more furious, asking Vicier to reveal his name to him. After knowing his name, the professor stated that everyone in the class saw that his eyes were closed. But our boy was quick with his reply, telling the professor that his eyes were closed, but it didn't mean that he was sleeping. Hearing that kind of reply, the professor eats a humble pie and tells Vicier that he was mistaken. Our boy said it was understandable, making the professor even more furious as he wondered what kind of psycho had entered the academy this time. Failing to break Vicier over his responses, the professor decides to move on. He tells the class that because of the answer that Fire Corps rank 1, Sinclair gave, the Fire Corps have gained 1 point out of 10 for behavior points. The professor then suggested something to Vicier, telling him that if he could answer his question, he was going to give him and the Ice Corps the points. However, the professor warns Vikir that if he answers the question wrongly, he was going to give the entire Ice Corps students negative points instead. Our boy simply shouted back that his suggestion was unfair, but the professor didn't care anymore and presented the question. He wanted to know the location of the Empire's military and where the Baloch fought. With that location, he wanted Vikir to tell him where the Baloch tribe's stronghold is. Sinclair was stunned by the professor's sudden question. She knew that compared to other tribes, information on the Balochs was hard to come by, making the question extremely difficult. Bianca, on the other hand, was pissed off at Vikir's arrogant attitude towards the professor, calling him an idiot in his mind, as she believes that everyone in the Ice Corps was going to be at a loss because he couldn't answer the question. Taking the question in mind, Vikir thought about for a while, a memory of the Baloch tribe, dancing around a campfire while smiling and having meat in their hands came into his mind. He remembers his barbarian family along with the precious memories he had made with them. Just the thought of them makes our boy smile. And so, he calmly answers back to the professor, revealing the location of the fight between the Balochs and the Empire. He spams everyone with accurate information and a strong possible location of the Balochs' stronghold. His answer was enough to stun everyone who heard it in the classroom. After ending his answer, Vikir knew that after the Alman incident, the Balochs had actually shifted their stronghold, so telling the class about their old place was no big deal. But his answer was still considered incredible, as PG was left stunned with his mouth wide open upon hearing it. Even Professor Snape was impressed by Vikir's answer as it was exactly spot on. He wonders how it was possible for our boy to know about the thesis that hasn't been verified by the academic world. But as he continues to think about Vikir's answer, the professor soon recalls that a student with the same name had recently placed first in the theory exam. And so, the professor decides to give Vikir 10 points for his answer, while giving the rest of the Ice Corps 1 point each. But after finding out that Vikir had placed first in the theory exam, he decides to humble him by not overlooking the fact that he had closed his eyes during his lesson. So the professor decides to minus 10 points from Vikir. Sinclair was looking at our boy. In her mind, she didn't even notice him because of how common the name Vikir was. Even in his nerd disguise, our boy couldn't hide his aura as she continued to gaze at him, while he stood tall, basking in the rays of the sun. Even Tudor was drawn to Vicier as he continues to stare at him from across the classroom. The other students were talking amongst themselves, realizing that Vicier was the one who placed first in the theory exam, but some didn't care, as all of them almost had a negative score in points. They seemed to believe that Vicier was only a nerd, which makes them want to go and punch him in the face. Looking at our boy, Tudor couldn't help but smirk, after finding the smartest person when it comes to theory. But he wonders how useful that would be during the practical lessons. We now change scenes to a large football-like field, where the students were playing a game called Run Flat, which uses a special type of ball and gloves. It's a sport with 20 people on each team. Points are acquired when the ball is in the other team's goal area. It's against the rules to use mana and weapons. Besides that, it is a game where any method can be used to score goals. The match starts off with a player stomping the ground hard. It turns out to be Tudor, who smashes through the defense line of the opposite team with ease. As he carries the ball to score, he declares to everyone that he was the best when it comes to run flat, and that this was his time to shine. The girls in the stand cheered him on, commenting about how hot he was, while Bianca was annoyed, calling the sport barbaric. As Tudor reaches closer to the goal of the enemy team, a familiar three-headed group appears to block his way. It turns out to be the triplets from the Baskerville family. They stand against Tudor together, calling him an arrogant bastard and daring him to try and break through them. Instead of being afraid of the rumored Iron-Blooded Swordsman family's troublemaker triplets, Tudor was excited. Much to the triplets' surprise, he didn't face them head-on. Instead, he weaved past two of them easily, leaving them shocked. But before reaching the end, the last triplet makes his appearance, telling Tudor to hand over the ball. Instead of answering back, Tudor simply prepares his left hand, and within a second, a bright blue light appears from it. Wasting no time at all, he slams his fist into the triplet's body, causing what looks like a Rasengan attack to appear on his stomach, knocking him out of his way completely. He tells the triplets that if he had decided to face them head-on, then he was going to lose it all. With only one person alive on the enemy team, Tudor makes a mad dash to the goalpost. After witnessing the powerful move he did, the other students were amazed by him as they could see how strong he was even without any mana or weapons. They had also heard rumors that he was Don Quixote's run-flat prodigy, which was expected of the Ice Corps ace. Running to the goal, Tudor was thinking to himself that there was no point in memorizing theories. As a true fighter, all he needed was the strength to win. But as he continues to run, he notices something in front of him. It turns out to be our boy Vikir, who was the only member on his team left standing in the way of Tutor. Tutor recognizes Vikir as the student who responded back to Professor Snape in this morning's lecture. Our boy was actually annoyed by what was happening right now. He had told the triplets not to send Tutor on his way, and decided to step aside to let him score. But there's a twist. Instead of aiming for the goalpost, Tutor actually decides to mess with Vikir. Thinking that with this body slam, he was going to help Vikir focus more on training his body than studying. Unfazed by what was happening, Vikir showed no reaction at all to Tutor's sudden attack. Instead, he simply stood still, resulting in Tutor falling through the air after he crashed into Vikir. Like a car hitting a wall, it turns out that the impact from crashing into Vikir was enough to knock him out. His face was completely blurred, showing no signs of life. Even Bianca and Sinclair couldn't believe what was going on as they witnessed this sight from the stands. Vikir turns his head to look behind, only to see Tutor finally landing onto the ground with a heavy slam. Thinking about what had just happened, Vikir initially planned on dodging Tutor, but instead, he questions why this blonde kid would just run into him first. Before he could make sense of things, our boy simply fell to the ground as well, moaning loudly in pain because in his mind, he was going to pretend to be injured. The sleeping blonde prince laid on the field completely flat on his back after the incident with Vikir, his face covered in sweat. Moments later, his eyes suddenly opened wide. Tutor was surrounded by his fellow students, as he continued to lay on the ground, confused by what had happened to him. The voices of his classmates asking him if he was okay didn't even register with him, as he wondered what he was doing right now, whether he had fainted or actually fallen asleep during the match. He started to remember what he was doing before seeing the scene in front of him. Tutor had decided during the match to mess with Vikir, who ranked first in theory, for a bit. He was going to tease him by barging into his shoulder a little, but the moment they made contact, everything went black for him, so he couldn't remember exactly what happened. As he sat up, Tutor looked at Vikir, who was dusting off his body. He couldn't believe that a nerd like him could actually knock out the great Tutor Don Quixote. Seeing that there wasn't even a single scratch on our boy, Tutor was determined to test out what happened just now again. Once more, the game was about to begin with everyone getting into their positions at the start of the match. The ball was once again passed over to Tutor, who was thinking that something was wrong with the incident against Vikir, and so, he wanted to do it again to test his own theory. This time, the triplets of the Baskerville family immediately stood on guard against Tutor, while also acting like a shield for Vikir, who simply stood at the back of the field. But as soon as the match started, Bianca and Sinclair, who were watching from the stands, were confused by what was going on. Instead of going for the goal post, Tutor was aiming right for the triplets and Vikir, ignoring the words from his teammates as he charged towards them instead. Tutor confidently challenges the triplets and Vikir once more, which the triplets happily accept, replying to Tutor that he wasn't going to get past them this time round. Once again, the triplets failed at blocking and intercepting Tutor, who held the ball and got past them easily a second time. His eyes were completely focused on Vikir this round, charging towards our boy at full speed. Vikir watches closely as the blonde kid continues to run in his direction. He thinks about how he had ordered the triplets to keep Tutor away from him, but at the same time, he wonders why Tutor was so serious about coming towards him now. The genius spearman was revved up, his eyes were locked onto our boy, no longer seeing him as human but a target now. Tutor was serious, he knew that what happened to him was no mere coincidence. So he decides to use the Azure Spearman family's run-flat secret technique, Saint Spear Tackle. Yes, this powerful family actually created a killer move for a ballgame. An avatar of a knight with a powerful lance was summoned behind Tutor as his eyes turned completely blue, determined to smash into Vikir and send him flying in the air this time. Even though such a powerful force was coming straight to his face, Vikir was actually pretty calm, pretty demure. His glasses were showing no signs of fear at all. Soon enough, we cut to black once again. In the next moment, the same gray-hair-scarred face student appears above Tutor, asking him if he was awake again. The blonde prince once again wakes up in his usual T-pose, completely wasted on the ground again. He immediately sat upright, questioning how it was possible for him to faint once more, but as he struggles to understand what was happening, the muscular guy beside him tells him to calm down. He reveals to Tutor that after he used his family's technique, which was hitting Vikir with a high-speed tackle, it simply resulted in him being bounced off our boy at that same high speed. Ladies and gentlemen, we have our next challenger. As the student who woke up Tutor tightens the headband on his head, he tells Tutor that he understands why he was so focused on Vikir, as our boy was clearly hiding something from them. This time, Sancho, the muscular student, was going to go against our boy. With the sun shining brightly on him, he heads over to the match. Telling Tutor that as a man and a friend, he couldn't just watch and do nothing after seeing him get beaten twice by Vicier. This is the transfer student who came from the Mercenary Guild Association in the north, Sancho Barataria. Due to his overwhelming physique, he is not considered eligible for his age group in his league, so he decided not to play run flat. Basically, this guy was too overpowered to play a ball game. But because of Vicier, he changes his mind. As he held onto the ball, Sancho talked about how in the frozen land of the north, newborns of the elderly who are on the verge of death, fight desperately. It means they're all warriors. It's round 3 for the triplets this time as they faced off against the giant. Determined and hyper-focused, the triplets weren't letting anyone pass them this round. Third time's the charm, right? Well, not in this world, because in the next second, instead of dodging and weaving past the triplets like Tutor did twice, Sancho just decides to do the wrestling move and clothesline all 3 of the hounds together. Sancho easily slams and flings the triplets into the air, pushing and making them fly away from Vicier, who simply stood his ground. As they flew past their master, our boy was pissed off this time. His eyes were glowing red behind his glasses, whispering to the triplets if they wanted to die. The triplets could only cry as they flew past their master once again, apologizing for their 3rd failure in a row while in the air. Even after sending 3 people in the air, Sancho wasn't stopping his attack. He charges straight at Vicier like a bull. His face was filled with determination, just like how Tutor was from before, in order to reveal what Vicier was hiding from them. Our boy, on the other hand, was still emotionless even before a giant that was rampaging towards him. Just inches away from him this time, Sancho readies himself, telling Vicier that he was going to see if he could endure his full power this time. With his hand raised up high in the air, Sancho lands a full blow onto Vicier's stomach with all his might, causing a loud bang. But the moment he got into contact with our boy, all he could feel and sense was that he was hitting a huge mountain of stone. The feeling in his arm was shocking to Sancho, who was known for his powerful strength. His hand was shaking as he tried to move Vicier by a little bit. Even after being hit by Sancho's full strength, Vicier didn't feel anything at all. Instead, he was thinking that he should play along with what Sancho wanted. So he purposely jumped backwards with a bit of strength, pretending that Sancho's attack had actually done something to him. In order to make sure it was right, Vicier created skid marks on the field with his body, even crashing into the ground like the triplets did. The other students who were watching were amazed by what they witnessed. They couldn't believe that Sancho had broken through the enemy team's defense. But some of them wondered if the guy he pushed was still alive. Unknown to the other students, Sancho, completely aware of what was really going on, couldn't help but stare at his shaking hand, wondering what that feeling was he just experienced and if Vicier was actually human. Distracted by the weird sensation that Vicier gave off, Sancho was unaware that one of the triplets had recovered from his attack and sneaked up to him. Within seconds, the triplet had stolen the ball from him and made a mad dash towards the goal. Before long, the referee blows the whistle, announcing the end of the game. It turns out that thanks to the triplets, Vicier's team had won the match. As the team continued to congratulate the triplets on their sneaky win tactic, Vicier finally got off the ground and started to dust himself off. But then someone pours a bottle of water onto his head. It turns out to be Sancho, who praises Vicier as he knew that he was the secret contributor to Class B's victory. Even Tutor was impressed by our boy, who retired because of their win. He reveals that he had initially planned on teaching Vicier a lesson during the practical lessons because he was jealous, but then came to a realization of how shameful that was, and apologies to our boy for his rude actions from before. Sancho was even more interested in Vicier, asking him about what exercises he did in order to have such a solid build. He even thought that Vicier had used mana during the match. Taking off his headgear, Vicier reveals that he was just a commoner, and didn't have an ounce of mana to use. Tutor was sad to hear that, calling it a shame. If he had received proper training, combined with his current blessed body, then he was sure that Vicier would have been an expert like him. As the 3 of them chat, Tutor's cheerleading squad arrives, calling out to them to use the towel they brought to wipe their sweat. Once again, the ladies' man was doing his business while Sancho hands Vicier a towel to use. The Azure Spearman family's hero, Tutor, and the Mercenary Guild's ace, Sancho. One day, they will become heroes who will save mankind by hunting an endless number of demons during the time of the fall. As he took off his glasses, Vicier couldn't help but smile to himself. After all, he found it strange to see that these 2 gentlemen had a past like this. The moment he reveals his face, everyone around, from guys to girls, were all stunned by what they were looking at. Even Bianca and Sinclair were blushing hard, while watching from the stands. As our boy wipes the water from his head, basking in the rays of the sun. His toned body etched into his stretch, revealing the fine lines and curves. Everyone couldn't believe how handsome the nerd they knew was underneath the glasses he wore. Unknown to Vikir, he didn't know that from this point onwards, his days at the academy were going to become more troublesome. The scene changes to nighttime, where we chance upon a mansion. A man with a purple goatee was horrified by something, as Vikir's voice could be heard. Revealing that this man is Lloyd Dokeseller, 52 years old. Wearing his Assassin's Creed uniform, you guys know that it means it was demon hunting time. Multiple dead bodies surrounded the two of them, with the floor covered in blood as pieces of meat were flung everywhere. Vicier cornered the man to a statue, revealed as the leader of the information house and the headmaster of the orphanage. Vicier knew that Lloyd had conspired with the demon he was hunting, and sold children from high-ranked families. "Did you think you would go unnoticed?" questioned Vicier as he threatens him with Beelzebub. Lloyd was horrified to see the kind of aura that Vicier was showing off. Due to its solid nature, Lloyd thought that Vicier was a swordmaster. Hearing that, the man was almost right. Vicier's aura was pretty much in a solid state, but is still closer to liquid. To be specific, he was currently at the highest level for a graduator. Instead of slicing him into bits, Vicier offers the man a chance at redemption. Telling him to work with him in order to catch the demon, and if he does, Vicier was willing to compensate him accordingly. Even at death's door, Lloyd hesitates to help. As Vicier waited for a reply from the man, something happened. A huge piece of a building was flung in the air right above them. It soon crashes and destroys the very place they were at. Vicier was quick to dodge the impact of the building, and immediately looked up to see a shadowy figure, lighted by the moonlight, standing on the remains of the building that was thrown at them. A nasty green aura started to float around our boy. It turns out that this was the overwhelming energy that he had sensed from afar. Looking at the strange figure who wore a mask, while wielding a hammer made out of human faces. Vicier questions him, "Are you the elite corpse?" Even after being asked a question, the mysterious figure didn't say a single word to Vicier. Instead, he simply leapt off the rickety and broken building where he stood. Soaring across the sky, the figure raised his massive hammer, forged out of human face skin. He swiftly swung it down hard towards Vicier, who easily dodged it by moving to the side, but not before the forceful impact of the hammer obliterated the place he was at before. The figure, seeing that its first attack failed to kill our boy, quickly switched his stance on the way he handled his hammer. He grabbed it nearer to the head this time and went into a ferocious close swing at Vicier, who once again dodged by bending it backwards like Beckham. Now face to face with the disgusting hammer by a few inches, Vicier noticed that the figure was adopting a strange battle stance. With a twist at the handle of the hammer, the figure lunged it straight towards Vicier's head, almost decapitating him completely. But all the attacks couldn't land on our boy, as he simply bounced effortlessly away from him this time. Standing on guard, Vicier was able to quickly analyze the unique characteristics of the opponent he was fighting right now. He could sense the aura of a high-ranked graduator emanating from it and noticed that the figure uses the religiously holy Quo Vadis bludgeoning technique that was seen just moments ago. Combining all these facts together, Vicier realized that the mysterious figure in front of him was not the elite corpse he had been hunting for these past few days. This made him wonder, did a demon infiltrate the religiously holy nation? But knowing them, he knew about how they had their own corrupt sectors too. This made him think that the guy in front of him right now was simply a servant who works under the 10 elite corpses. Unsummoning Beelzebub back into his hand, Vicier tells the figure that if he kills him, then he might be able to meet the 10 elite corpses. Him coming here was perfect for our boy, since he was getting annoyed from having to constantly get rid of trash like before. But this time was different. He could actually let loose for a while. After saying that, the man with the hammer leapt gracefully into the air again, hoping to land a blow onto our boy. This time, there was an impact. The sound was loud enough to send shockwaves through the air. It turns out that instead of using his blade, Vicier was going in for close combat. He blocked the massive hammer strike by just using one of his legs, doing a horizontal leg split, Jean-Claude Van Damme style. Instead of your typical shouting of the word, "What?" the masked figure simply lets out a grunt noise, surprised that its attack was stopped by a single leg. But wait, there's more. Vicier was on the attack this time. He charged his arm with the blood-red aura of the Baskerville power. In just 1 second, he managed to land 5 Rasengan-like injuries onto the masked figure's body, before ending the attack with a powerful right hook to the side of its ribs. Sending it flying into the nearby abandoned building. As it enters the building, the masked figure seems to be able to withstand Vicier's powerful blows. Wasting no time at all, our boy also leaps into the building, following closely behind. As the masked figure tried to prepare another attack with a swing of his hammer, our boy was way faster. In an instant, he snapped the arm of the masked figure so fast that it couldn't even react to the attack. With only its right arm on the hammer, Vikir teleported behind it in an instant, with swift and deadly precision. He elbows and knees the masked figure's only remaining working arm, breaking it completely like its other arm. Even after breaking both of them, Vikir isn't done. He flips over, grabs its shirt, and flings it to the other side of the room. It turns out that his final throw had meaning behind it, as the masked figure was impaled by a sharp iron pipe that was hidden in the building's walls. The only sound it could make was some grunting noises as Vikir slowly walked over to its side. Looking closer at its exposed chest, he could see huge scar marks all over and the word, Afibo, imprinted on its skin, which makes him think that that was its name. Seeing that Afibo could no longer escape, Vikir starts to question him, asking him about his master and the person responsible for making him this way. But no human words came out from his mouth, only the sounds of groaning. Hearing him struggle to answer, Vikir could sense that the person who made him this way might have been controlling what he could say. Reaching out to the steel rod that impaled Afibo, Vikir lets him know that interrogation can also come in other forms, besides words. Twisting the steel rod, Vikir tells Afibo while causing him even more pain that he was going to slice his body into smaller pieces, along with his intestines, bone structures, and injuries. All the information he needed was in the freshness of the blood in his veins and the concentration of his mana. Those things would tell Vikir a lot of things. And so, as the night goes on, in this beautiful moonlight, Vikir tells Afibo that the interrogation of his life was about to begin. After the interrogation went on for quite some time, Vikir could hear the sounds of someone calling for help coming from the rubble in the middle of the square from before. So he went to check out what it was. Upon lifting up the rocks, he saw that Lyad had actually somehow survived the attack from Afibo, where he threw the building at them from the start. Knowing that he was actually a poison seller, Vikir reminds the frightened man that if he wanted to live, then he should know what he has to do, which was to tell our boy everything he needed to know. Unlike before, Lloyd was actually considering helping Vikir, asking him if in exchange he would spare his life, but Vikir warns him that it would depend on the type of information he provides. As the two of them were busy negotiating, another mysterious figure appeared, standing high above on a building nearby and watching the two of them closely. It turns out to be a human wearing a familiar uniform. Lyad finally breaks and shouts to Vikir that he was going to tell him everything, revealing that in the headmaster's room, there was his safe. But the moment he does, the Sharingan appears. Just kidding. This ain't Naruto, or is it? An eye appears with a unique green symbol on it, causing blood stains to appear around the eye as well. The moment the eye appeared, Vikir could sense which direction it came from and turned to see what it was, but it was too late. The mysterious third party had already disappeared from the building's rooftop. After sensing that strange feeling, it somehow feels familiar to our boy. But because his attention was drawn somewhere else, he doesn't notice the fact that Lloyd was busy puking out 3 other heads from his mouth. Ew, ew, ew. As soon as he turns to see Lloyd, a bright green light appears. Soon enough, a huge green explosion occurs, destroying everything in its path. The bells of a nearby church began to ring as the explosion was heard by everyone in the city. The people were coming out of their homes, shouting that there had been an explosion as a battalion of soldiers made their appearance. They headed towards the scene of the explosion and could see a huge smoke cloud in the distance. As the soldiers were watching the smoke, Dolores made her appearance, questioning them on what was going on and whether there were any casualties. One of the soldiers reports to her that they were still investigating the remnants of the explosion, but the issue is that there was almost no evidence due to the explosion from earlier on. In the aftermath of the explosion, the place where Vicier was is now covered by multiple people along with a huge crater in the middle of it. Dolores was meticulously exploring the area as well, seeing the explosion which can be seen as normal, the traces of the fight which were imparted on the orphanage building. As she looked around, she could only wonder what kind of evil was fought in this very place. As she continues to look around for clues, she notices something on the floor. It was a piece of our boy's mask. Part of it had been broken off. Upon seeing it, Dolores quickly kneels down to cover it with her skirt, hiding it from the nearby soldiers. One of them notices her strange actions and asks if she was feeling all right. Dolores, in her kneeling position, simply replies that she was feeling a bit sick. Continuing to cover Vicier's mask as the soldier reveals that there were no casualties and that she shouldn't push herself, Dolores was in a panic mode. After all, she was flustered and hid part of the mask because she knew that it belonged to the Night Bloodhound. We start off this part back with Professor Snape, who appears with an annoyed look on his face as usual. It turns out that we're back in the classroom, where a giant scorpion-like creature, the size of your mama, oh snap, lies on the table beside him. It turns out that the professor was finding out which student was responsible for writing a specific report that he was sent, and discovers it to be his least favorite student, our boy, Vikir. The report was apparently about the scorpion-like creature that laid dead on the table in the classroom. In the report, it was written that Vikir had written about how Venepians, the name of the creature, has an undiscovered second venomous fangs. This kind of information seemed like a false report to the professor, who regarded it as a joke with fake information, so he was going to deduct 10 points from everyone in the Ice Corps. As part of a punishment to the one who held the theory rank 1, Vikir. Hearing about this, our boy couldn't help but panicked a bit as he realized that he actually made a mistake. It turns out that the information he had written in the report hasn't been discovered in the period he was in right now. Anyways, the professor was quick. He grabs onto a scalpel and proceeds over to the Venopion, eager to cut it open to confirm if there really was a second venomous fang hidden in its abdominal exoskeleton, as written by Vikir in his report. If nothing came out of it, the entire Ice Corps was going to have their points deducted and Vikir would end up humiliated. Taking the sharp scalpel that glimmers in the light, the professor points it exactly in the center of the Venopion body. With just the tip, he makes a small incision, causing blood to flow out of it. The moment the scalpel made the cut, something quick and sharp shot out of the Venopion's body, right towards the professor's head, giving him a headshot. All the students in the classroom were shocked by what happened in that brief moment. None of them could have predicted this happening. For some reason, the sharp needle, covered in a purple-like poison liquid, stopped just barely inches away from the professor's face, who was feeling terrified. He loses his dignity as he falls to the ground, screaming like a little girl over the fact that he almost died. It turns out that Vikir had saved his life by using his book as a shield, blocking the second poisonous fang that he had written about in his report from reaching the professor's face. With a calm look on his face, Vikir questions the professor if he had enough proof right now to validate his report. The professor was busy processing all the information in his head. He couldn't believe that there really was a second venomous fang. He also couldn't believe that a student saw a Venopion and made a big discovery that could solve the cases of the mysterious deaths that had been happening for some time now. In order to regain his dignity, the professor decides to give all the members of the Ice Corps one additional point. He even tells Vikir to come visit him in his research lab after class, in order to provide a more detailed explanation about his report. Hearing that there was no punishment, Vikir agrees to the professor's request. As he headed back to his seat at the back of the classroom, the students around him started to talk about Vikir, calling him amazing for knowing about the second venomous fang. His actions today started to change their minds about how they used to think that sports was the only cool thing in school, but now, thanks to Vikir, being smart was slowly becoming cool. But other students chime in during the discussion, recalling that Vikir was also good at sports. After all, he went against Tudor and Sancho during the match from the other time. Finally reaching his seat, PG tells him that he had done a good job, while the students realized the most important thing about our boy. Which is the fact that behind the nerdy glasses, he was actually hiding his amazing-looking face and glowing hair. Ignoring the noise from his classmates, Vikir began to close his eyes once again, recalling the massive explosion from yesterday night, when he was out hunting the demons at the orphanage. He actually did take on massive damage. The explosion was strong enough to burn off his skin on his body, arms and face, revealing his raw muscles underneath. He even had his hand completely blown off. But luckily, thanks to his skills, he was able to recover from the damages almost instantly. But it still hurts like a ton. Right after the explosion, Afibo had hidden his tracks. The only thing Vikir had gotten out of that interaction was the ledger in the headmaster's safe. The ledge had the location of the children who were used as food for the demons. Vikir could see that as the locations had no connections, he can't completely negate the possibility of more than one elite corpse in the capital. But more importantly was the mysterious shadowy figure he saw in passing yesterday, the one acting cool by standing alone on top of a nearby building from where he was. Vikir had seen him smiling from ear to ear, even wearing the same school uniform as he did. Which made our boy realize a very crucial clue, that amongst his fellow classmates in this room, there might be one of the 10 elites in the academy. Comment below if you think that one of the 10 elites is one of the new characters that have been introduced to us in this new season. Moving on from the demons, in the academy, there is a famous newspaper that exists within the capital. This newspaper's influence is immense, and every day the newspaper is released, it sells out rapidly. This is all thanks to the academy's newspaper club called Lucian, And the glorious president in charge of this excellent club is someone we are all familiar with, hint. She has blonde hair and a wing-like head accessory. Yes, it turns out to be third-year Academy student president of Lucian, Dolores Lune Quo Vadis, who is excitedly welcoming the new members of her club. She knew that if they applied to Lucian, which is rumored to be difficult to enter, means that they were persistent to a certain level. So she excitedly orders for their introductions to begin. The first new member turns out to be first-year Academy student, tutor La Mancha Don Quixote, who tells everyone that he wishes to become an elite in both his class and in the club. The second new member turns out to be first-year Academy student, Sancho Barataria, who tells everyone that he hates how people think he was just a big dumb brute, so he entered the club to become an intellectual. The third new member is first-year Academy student, Sinclair, who tells everyone that money and information usually come hand in hand when it comes to power, but she ensures them that she entered the club because she thinks that information is more important. The fourth new member is first-year Academy student, Bianca Faux Usher. Her introduction was simple, telling everyone that she simply chose the club with the clearest vision, and that she was going to do her best. The fifth member is our boy's boy, first-year Academy student, PG, who stutters in his introduction, but nonetheless, he shouts out loud that he enjoys gathering and analyzing information, which made him think that the newspaper club was the best fit for him. The last member to join is our boy, first-year Academy student, Vikir, who lacks excitement in his introduction, simply tells everyone that it was a school rule that everyone must join a club, so he simply followed PG. But in truth, he had a secret agenda. Lucian, the famous newspaper club of the Academy, was a place where he could easily obtain information. But that there was a catch. The Saintess is here with him, making things slightly uncomfortable. After his introduction, Dolores singles him out of everyone, telling Vicier that he couldn't be a Lucian report with that half-assed attitude he showed, but as she scolds him, the member behind her notices something. She quickly brings out a newspaper article and shoves Dolores out of the way. In an excited tone, she questions Vicier if he was the one in the newspaper, as she actually found him familiar, and couldn't believe that such a famous student would join their club. It turns out that the club had written an article about our boy during the match. The title is, Exclusive. Who is the Ice Corps freshman who appeared in the run-flat match? An unknown freshman who attended yesterday evening's physical education class. Looking at the article, Vicier remained silent while Tudor laughed out loud, pointing out that person captured in the photo was our boy. Even Dolores was clueless about when this report had been released. It turns out that the girl beside her was called Anna, a third-year Academy student, and also the vice president of Lucian. She proudly tells Dolores that she had gotten information about a handsome freshman, so she finds that if she didn't release such information, then she couldn't call herself a reporter. After hearing that kind of answer, Dolores was defeated and took a step back. Anna took over the introduction, revealing to the first years that the second-year students had already gone out to collect news, so she decided to start their activity with everyone that was present here now. 2 articles were presented, with the day, month cancelled out. It was actually something that happened at the dawn of last night. A suspicious unidentified assailant appeared and burned down a certain orphanage in town, down to the ground. Everyone in the club was now sitting around a table, reading articles presented to them. PG was the first to know what it was, and questions if the article given to them was about yesterday's explosion in the capital. Anna reveals that it was true and that on the day of the incident, she had obtained news when he went outside the academy. She further tells PG that the club had hypothesized that the person behind this incident and that the one behind the recent murder in the capital were the same person. What's shocking about the incident at the orphanage was that the majority of the children's bodies at this organ gauge had been identified. After hearing about it from Anna, PG quickly whispers into Vikir's ear, asking him if he thinks that the mysterious person they were looking for was the one responsible. Our boy didn't reply back, but simply thought that the dead children's bodies were the doing of the demon that he was hunting. After revealing all the information about the incident, Anna decides that it was time for them to determine the headline of the article they'll be sending out. Everyone started to write down their ideas about what would be the best headlines, from the birth of a terrible villain greater than the appearance of a monster causing chaos outside the academy, what are the Imperial Guards doing, an unparalleled villain and a challenge to the Quo Vadis family, the children who died suspiciously. Who is the one behind this? After some time, Bianca was reading through what everyone wrote, and said that none of them were impactful enough. Tudor agrees with her words, wondering if it was because the villain's name was still unknown. Giving examples for cruel criminals who have nicknames like Jack the Ripper and Bluebeard were given to them. Anna calls out Tudor's idea for giving the villain a nickname good, which immediately made him give out his idea of a nickname, which was the Death Side Shadow Master. Which Anna immediately rejects, calling it a shit nickname and sending Tudor down into a sadness spiral. And so, the group started to come out with various nicknames, ranging from the explosion demon that brings misfortune, which was too long, so another suggestion was the orphanage killer, which sounded impactful, while another suggestion was Mr. Terrorist. As the group started to debate against one another over which nickname was best suited for the villain, Dolores was eerily silent, not speaking a single word during the entire discussion. The first words she spoke during this session were the words, "The Night Bloodhound." It turns out that after reading about the incident in the article, she recalled the mask that she had picked up at the scene, which definitely belongs to the Night Bloodhound, making her wonder why he was there at that time. After seeing him in person, she found him as a type of person that didn't want any type of rank or wealth. He even diligently treated the people of the slums who had the Red Death. She could see that his devotion and love towards the poor people were real. Because of those actions, Dolores had thought that Vikir had stolen the Saintess tear for a great cause, but his appearance at the scene of the incident made her question his true nature, making her believe that he might have really killed the headmaster and the children at the orphanage. But she believes that what she saw at the slums was accurate and that he wasn't evil. If the Night Bloodhound is a criminal, then she was sure that he would have his reasons. Distracted by her thoughts, Anna actually hears the name Dolores had spoken out by mistake, which catches her attention. Looking up to the table, she saw that everyone was staring at her. They all liked the nickname of the Night Bloodhound as it was a barbarian tribe's naming style, which sounded really violent. The rest of the group agrees with the nickname, finding it gloomy and negative, perfect for a criminal. Dolores immediately covers her mouth, embarrassed that she had mistakenly mumbled the Night Bloodhound's name out loud to everyone. Seeing that the nickname was settled, Anna suggested the title of the article to be "Who is the Night Bloodhound?" That's filling the capital with fear. But Dolores was quick to defend the Night Bloodhound, reminding Anna that the Lucian articles must only contain the truth, and that it hasn't been confirmed yet if that person is the criminal. As the president and vice president battled it out, Tudor turns to Vikir, asking about his opinion on something. Tudor wanted to know about Vikir's thoughts on whether the Night Bloodhound was evil or not. Our boy simply replied that he didn't care about that, but in his mind, he couldn't believe that he would hear the Saintess say the name of the Night Bloodhound out loud like that. Not accepting the answer that he didn't care, Tudor goes in for a hug, forcing Vikir to choose if he really had to. Seeing that Tudor wanted a real answer, Vikir thought about it seriously for a moment. So he changed his answer and spoke these words. "What I know for certain is that they're not virtuous, so they're evil." Just as Tudor was about to agree with Vikir's words, Dolores slams her hand heavily onto the table, catching their attention. She was standing upright, shocked by Vikir's words that the Night Bloodhound isn't virtuous. Her eyes were completely focused on our boy, asking him about how he was so sure about that. Seeing her reaction, Vikir was actually stunned and confused by what was going on. Even Tudor's hand was sweating heavily as he let go of Vikir's shoulder, sensing the danger that our boy might be in. We start this chapter once again with Dolores questioning Vikir on why he thinks that the Nightblood isn't a good guy. Her questioning was making everyone on Vikir's side nervous as they started to sweat over her words. Dolores's eyes were set on their target, showing us why it was drawn as a cross eye. She continues to question Vikir's on why he was so sure about his words. Knowing who he was, she continues to ask Vikir to answer her questions, but he remains silent, while Tudor starts to think that he had done something wrong. Seeing and hearing no attempts at a reply, Dolores addresses everyone in the club, claiming that they believed in something without any proof. She reminds them that as reporters, if they say things that aren't proven by facts, then they can destroy an innocent person's life. Tudor cuts in, informing her that the guards of the city had testified that the Night Hound had destroyed the buildings and killed the headmaster of the orphanage. But Dolores refutes their claim, telling Tudor that the Imperial Guard's interview responses are just testimony consisting of deductions and no solid evidence. She even reminds him that the question regarding the children's corpses that were found in the orphanage's basement has yet to be resolved, and that there were too many questionable variables to determine that the Night Hound killed those children. The girls on the other hand were stunned by how determined Dolores was in proving them wrong about the Night Hound, even worried about it. Seeing her so determined to prove the right facts, they couldn't believe that she was staying neutral even though this happened in an orphanage that's managed by her own family. Seeing that no one else was complaining, Dolores turns to Anna, reminding her to edit the article to ensure that it's objective and unbiased. Hearing that order, Anna complains that if they do that, they wouldn't be able to write anything. But Dolores insists on it, saying that it wasn't too late to release a critical report that it was the Night Hound after what they had found about the incident. Her eyes started to look sad as she thought about what if the Night Hound really was evil, and reminded the club that if that was true, then they can criticize him harshly. Hearing those words, Vicier couldn't help but take a peek at her through his thick nerd glasses. As the group starts to take in Dolores's words, another member of the club bursts into the room, shouting for the president's attention. The member reports to her that the club advisory was asking for her, stating that the reason was because he wanted her to re-edit the report and state that the Night Hound was a bad person. Hearing about the request, Dolores started to feel stressed, and replied back to the member that she was going to talk to the club advisor, since he likes making articles into headlines. After settling things in the room, Dolores left with the member to seek out the club advisor and his request. As she left, Tudor was impressed by their president, calling her a girl boss. Hearing that, Vicier couldn't help but reply that Dolores had been that way since a long time ago, which confuses Tudor. In Vicier's mind, Dolores looked the same as when she led the Holy Knights on the front lines of the battlefield during the fall before he had regressed. She wore mighty armor and her holiness radiated in a bright light all over. She could be seen on the battlefield, ushering new commands to the Holy Knights, ordering them to push forward as she blesses them with her holy light. She would often complain about the troops, a sign that people these days have weak faith. She even scolds them when she finds them messing around their breaks, telling them to save lives instead. She reminded them that back in her days, if a demon had appeared, then they would just jump in to help. Recalling his past memories of her, Vicier started to smile to himself. He had thought that she would deem his actions as wicked, but to him right now, it doesn't feel bad because someone's trying to tell the truth about him. In his heart, he quietly thanks the Saintess for her help, as she argues with the club advisor over his request, who turns out to be Professor Snape. Moving on, in the earlier mornings, a siren started to blare loudly. As it continues to ring, PG awakens from his beauty sleep in a groggy state. The moment he raises his body upright, Vicier greets him with a good morning. Vicier was already up and ready, dressed in his school's exercise clothes and stretching, while PG was still rubbing his eyes, greeting good morning back to our boy. In this academy, everyone has to wake up at 6 a.m. When the alarm sounds, the stupidest head to the training area in front of the dorms. The students then participate in the exercises, following the instructor who stands at the front to wake themselves up. They start off their day with a light jog. After their morning exercises, the students will go their separate ways. Some would catch up on their sleep, some would go and take a bath, and some head straight to the cafeteria. PG could start to feel the strain on his body after the morning exercises. He complains to Vicier that his brain would be more active if he had slept through the morning exercises, but our boy refutes that claim, reminding PG that moving his body helps to activate his brain. But that wasn't what PG wanted to hear. He didn't want to be proven incorrect. Tudor cuts into their conversation, telling Vicier that he wasn't going to be popular with the girls if he didn't act so empathetic, and suggests that he practices it by being empathetic to PG. But hearing that suggestion, PG humbly declines the idea. Tudor then comes up with a new suggestion, asking if everyone is free this weekend, as they should have fun by going into the city. PG likes the idea behind it as there was actually a book he needed to buy. Even Sancho chimed into the conversation, saying there was a restaurant that he wanted to try in the city too. Hearing that it was okay with the rest, Tudor turns to ask Vicier. Pausing for a moment, our boy declined the invitation, saying that he needed to volunteer on the weekends. The group was stunned to hear that Vicier needed to do volunteering. PG reveals that our boy had received too many deductions. Hearing about that, Tudor realized that it was probably from Professor Snape, who would pick on Vicier all the time, even if he didn't do anything wrong. Hearing them talk about him, Vicier couldn't help but remain silent. So he moves on from the group, telling them to go to the city without him this time. But the moment he left them, the group started to chase after our boy, changing their plans because all of a sudden, they found volunteering fun. PG calls out to Vicier, telling him that his friends, they couldn't let him do it all alone. Sancho even reminds them that the more, the merrier. But as they followed behind Vicier closely, Tudor started to realize something unusual, drawing Sancho's attention as well as asking what it was. Tudor tells him that when Vicier is around, he naturally gravitates towards him. It was as though Vicier had the aura of an older brother. Hearing that, Sancho adds in, saying that even though Vicier was a quiet boy, he has that Sigma Riz about him that simply exudes charisma. Back when he was a mercenary, Sancho felt that such people were natural leaders. Even PG understood what the boys were saying about our boy. He couldn't help but smile to himself. After all, he found Vicier amazing. Amazing people like Tudor, from the physically great Don Quixote family, and Sancho, the transfer student from the Northern Mercenary Guild, approached him first. Vicier was also kind. he had helped PG at the entrance party when he was having a difficult time, and he was perfect in his studies and training. PG felt that as long as he was with Vikir, then he had a feeling that everything he does in life would be possible. But as they walked along the corridors, Vikir's bloodhound bloodthirst leaked out. He looked to the side, eyes red and unleashing his murderous aura. Since he was standing right beside him, PG immediately started to feel afraid when he saw Vikir this way. Ignoring everyone else's presence, Vikir could sense the disgusting aura that the demons gave off, covering the entire walkway they were in. The stench of this horrible aura was coming from a group of a guy and two girls walking away from them. Vikir continues to monitor that group as they slowly walk away from him. Knowing that PG was basically a human dictionary, Vikir asks him if he knew about other students well, and if specially, he knew about the guy that walked past them just moments ago. Jolted by the sudden request, PG asks if Vikir was talking about the guy between the two female students a moment ago, as he knew that guy well. Apparently, he was the most handsome guy in this school, a sophomore called Bane Kodzak. Vikir started to grit his teeth hard. After all, he didn't think that they would be this active within society. A member of the 10 elite corpses was right in front of him. As the suspect started to move further away, Vikir started to think about his choices right now, whether he should start the fight, but thinking about it, he decided not to as there would be a lot of casualties. Especially his group, where he couldn't allow the future heroes to get hurt. Sensing that something was off about our boy, the three guys were worried about him, asking Vikir about what was wrong. Our boy simply tells them that he wasn't feeling well, and that he was going to rest. Before engaging in a fight against one of the 10 elite corpses, Vikir decides to gather information first. He moves away from the group, using the skill in his second slot called Silent Heal Mushusu. Like Superman removing his glasses to change clothes, our boy did the same, while thinking that he should follow Bane closely behind. But because he was distracted by his thoughts, he doesn't see Dolores coming down the stairs beside him, resulting in a clash between the future titans. A loud scream from Dolores catches the attention of the boys as they gasp in shock over what happened. They could all see that Dolores had fallen to the ground, hurt by something as she waves her hand in pain, while Vikir stood there, stunned by what had just happened. Tudor and the boys rushed over, asking Dolores if she was okay. Tudor immediately tells Vikir to apologize to the president, which he did immediately while bowing his head down to her. But Dolores was completely fine with it and didn't need an apology as she also found herself being careless. As she was being helped by Sancho, she couldn't believe how muscular Vikir was. After bumping into him, it felt like she had hit a wall. Looking at our boy as he wears back his glasses, she notices that she couldn't sense his presence at all either, making her wonder who Vikir truly is. Seeing that there were too many people gathered here today, Vikir decides to postpone his plans of following and tailing Bane. Knowing that he was probably the one of the 10 elite corpses. Deep down the academy staircases, Bane could be seen leading the two girls into the darkness. Even the girls started to feel that something was off about this place, so they questioned him on why he had brought them to such a dark place. Instead of answering their worries, Bane simply tells them that he had some sad news which captures their attention completely as they were worried about him. He starts to tell the girls a story, about how recently, a certain guy had showed up in the school, and since then, he had been messing with him, and because of him, he hasn't been able to eat properly. The girl on his left was quick to defend Bane after hearing the story, telling him that if he was being bullied then she wouldn't forgive the guy in his story. He continues on with his story. Knowing about that guy, Bane decided to go see who he was one day, but he was wearing his school uniform by mistake, so he ran away instead. So the guy might have seen that he was one of the academy students. The girl on his right side was even more determined, telling Bane that if the guy comes to the school, then they'll stop him, as the two girls were always on his side. Hearing about how good these girls were to him, Bane thanks them, telling the girls that their hearts were as beautiful as their faces, and that they would always be together. From now on, that is. The moment he said those words, Bane immediately grabbed onto the faces of the two girls with his bare hands at the same time. He started to recall the pandemic mask-wearing bastard. Bane knew that he had the skill of a high-ranked graduator, so he was sure that our boy didn't die from the explosion like that. He could also see the way Vicier was attacking the places that were connected to the location he had eaten people from before. Which made him realize that Vicier was a human that was able to sense the presence of a demon. As he said this, the two girls' faces started to morph and change all over. They started to beg Bane, but he ignored them completely. It turns out that Bane is really the demon that Vicier had been hunting for. His demonic side started to appear as he absorbed the girls' faces into his hands. Taking in all the facts, Bane realized that Vikir might be the one who has something to do with Andromalius's death. As he said this, the girl's eye and mouth appeared on the side of his face, begging for someone to save her. It is revealed that Bane's true name is Dantalion, the 9th corpse of the demon's 10 elite corpses. He returned to see Vikir staring at something deeply, his attention completely drawn to it as someone speaks in the background. It turns out that our boy was back in the newspaper club room. It turns out that Anna was speaking to the first years. She was complaining about the numerous incidents that kept happening in the town recently. She continues to speak to the first years, revealing to them that she and Dolores had summarized the cases that had happened within the academy itself. Since they didn't have a lot of members available right now in Lucian, they wanted the first years like them to step up and fulfill this role instead. As she said this, Bianca and Tudor were distracted by the numerous cases written on the pieces of paper on the table in front of them, their eyes drawn towards them with a worried expression on their faces. Even Dolores was slightly worried as she read the report in her hand. Anna continues to give out orders to the young bloods, telling them to choose a case from one of the papers on the table. Their goal this time was to collect information and to write an article. Once done, they were to bring it back to the club. As each member of the first years started to look through the papers regarding the incidents in the academy, PG was nervous, thinking that this was going to be his first article since entering Lucian, while Bianca, after reading quite a few of the cases, couldn't believe that there were this many, making her question what was going in the capital lately. One of the papers had the title, "The Terrorists' Forewarning." A terrorist had warned that they would poison the river of Vicier, the capital city of Rock. Another report was titled, "Missing Handsome Theater Actor." The theater actor called Mr. B disappeared on his way home after his play. It is highly likely that a stalker fan is behind this incident. Another report was titled, "A Mysterious Murder Case. The head of a family has disappeared." Another report was titled, "Murder Case. The Murder That Shall Not Be Named. A certain person will be executed after hurting multiple people in the streets. They have said they were not behind it and are still pleading that their face had changed." Finally, the last report was titled, "A Rapid Increase in Missing People. A Sudden Increase in Missing People in Vicier. No suspects have been found." Is the Night Bloodhound behind this? After reading all the reports, Vikir went to select one for himself. The incident report he picked was a missing persons case inside the academy. According to the report, 3 academy students have gone missing. Those 3 have always been seen together, so there are a lot of witnesses. Did they run away because of love? After reading the report, Vikir's immense bloodhound aura started to rupture, his eyes glowed with hate. Looking at one of the missing students in the report, he recognizes him as the guy he was chasing after yesterday, one of the elite corpse's potential suspects. We now change scenes to the middle of the night, in one of those random buildings. We see a husband and wife sleeping together in the same bed. But for some reason, the husband was wide awake at this late time. He slowly rose up from his bed, not disturbing his wife who was soundly asleep. He then sat in a chair beside a window. It's revealed that his eyes were not normal, it was green, like those of the elite 10 corpses. Looking across the room, he asked someone a question. It turns out that he wasn't alone in the room at all, he had 4 members in front of him. He questions the group on whether they had found out something about the pandemic mask wearer who's interfering with their plans so far. It turns out that one of the members was Ephibo, who Vicier had fought in the previous nights. He silently mutters his report back to the husband. The second subordinate of the 9th corpse was called Geronto, who has red hair. Another subordinate was called Heva, who silently muttered and gave his report, while holding a massive pair of scissor-like weapons. The last of the group was a subordinate called Fido, who remained silent. It turns out that the husband is actually the real 9th corpse of the demon's 10 elite corpses, called Dantalion. He takes notes of their reports, realizing that they hadn't seen the mask-wearing vigilante since that day either, which made it seem like he was being very careful now. Transforming his hand into pieces where eyes and noses could be seen, Dantalion tells his followers that it couldn't be helped and to widen the scope of work from now on. Within a mere second, something shoots out from his demonic hand, hitting all 4 of the subordinates' faces at the same time. It turns out that Dantalion was going to share his faces with them, causing their current faces to morph and change to what he wanted them to wear this time. As the 4 subordinates wore new faces, Dantalion issued a new order, telling them to go into the areas with more light and find the person who was wearing the pandemic mask. But as he gave the order, the door to the room slowly opened. In a twist of fate, his wife had actually woken up from her sleep, and found him in this room. She looked confused, questioning Dantalion on what he was doing so early in the morning, and wondered who the other 4 people were in this room. The demon simply looked at her, not uttering a single word at first. As he closed his eyes, he talked about how he wanted to admire her face being alive for a little while longer, but seeing her and finding this out, left him with no choice. He orders Fido, who appeared right behind the wife in an instant, with a blade across her neck, to make sure her face remains untouched. The clueless wife could do nothing against them as she felt the cold stainless steel blade against her neck. After a single moment, the sound of flesh being cut could be heard as blood covered the floor. As she laid on the floor, bleeding from her wound, the wife couldn't make a single sound and could only cry as tears fell from her face. Dantalion didn't feel anything about this and continued to talk to his team about how the plan to open the gate has gradually been delayed due to Andromalus's death and the person who was wearing the pandemic mask. As he sat in his chair, Dantalion started to morph and change his own face, calling their current situation annoying. After his face changed, he ordered Ephibo to follow him, as they needed to see someone special. His face is finally revealed, as he scratches his chin, thinking that he should go and relieve his pent-up stress. The scene changes once again, this time, to a place with a slight holy feeling to it. Dantalion appears once again, this time, with a smile on his demonic face while wearing a cross on his neck and a priest outfit. Someone stood in front of him, asking him about why he was smiling. Dantalion replies that he simply couldn't help himself. After all, he had the beautiful saintess standing in front of him. It turns out to be Dolores, who wasn't amused by his remarks, as she tells him that she didn't come to see him to joke around, calling him as Sir Quilty. Brushing her remarks aside, Dantalion tells her that he was worried because her visits have become scarce lately. Dolores tells him that recently, there have been a lot of murders and missing people, which was why she has been busy since she was covering them. Hearing this, the holy man could see that her club activities have gotten busy, as the world was becoming a more and more brutal place to be in. As he smiles at her, Dantalion knew that the one responsible for all these horrible things was him. Looking at him, Dolores couldn't help but feel nervous about something. She knew the man before him as Quilty Lune Indulgentia, the head of the Indulgentia family, the collateral bloodline to the Quo Vadis family. They were currently volunteering and managing Quo Vadis's resources at the orphanage, monastery, and hospital, but they were also supporting the exemption system, that erases the wins of the sinful rich. So she knew that this two-faced person in front of her was definitely hiding something. As he leans closer to her face, Dantalion questions Dolores about why she needed to speak with him. She reveals to him that she came here to request for the exemption system to be abolished. She found it wrong to exempt a person from all their sins just because they were wealthy. He refutes her statement, saying that there was nothing wrong with the system as the exemption policy has been in the church up until now. He also found that donating a large sum of money was already a large form of punishment. But Dolores wasn't budging from her stance. She counters his argument by stating that sins are something you must expose yourself for in front of God, and forgiveness was only given once you have received the appropriate punishment. With the holy light radiating brightly behind her, she ends her argument, saying that the people affected by the exemption system cannot be saved. Her final words left Dantalion speechless as his mouth was left open. But he quickly closes it, turning away from Dolores, and reminding her that he was simply following the church's doctrine, and that her best course of action was to speak directly to her father, the leader and cardinal of the church. As he continues to face away from her, Dantalion tells her to return, since he heard that the academy students were coming here to volunteer today. So there was no need for them to have a fight within the Quo Vadis family in front of her juniors. Dolores accepts his proposal, but tells him that she would come back later so they could discuss this matter even more. As she left the church, Dantalion's transformation was leaking out. His face was riddled with multiple eyes as he looked back at her, grinning widely. His demonic side was going haywire as his thoughts were filled with how beautiful Dolores looked. He had almost given in to his impulses and collected her face, but he needed to hold himself back, clenching his teeth so hard that they bled. He saw Dolores, the saintess, as the finest product that he had discovered in this world. Dantalion wanted to collect her face when her face was in despair, after the chaos descended into this world. He continues to tremble with his impulses, holding himself back, as he wanted to open the gate as soon as possible. He begs his fellow brethren to hurry and descend the chaos into this world, so he can claim what he wants. The scheme changes to Vikir standing alone in front of a gate belonging to a huge building. He looks around wondering if this was it. Based on the report given to him by Cindy, this was the orphanage that she had found after analyzing Andromalus's ledgers. Which meant it was highly likely that this place was connected to the 10 elite corpses. Looking at the flag being raised, Vicier could see that this place was probably the property of the Quo Vadis family. If a demon is planted within the Iron Blood family, and the Holy Divine family, then it is also highly likely there were demons hiding amongst the other families. After the explosion, the Night Bloodhound had garnered attention, so Vicier wanted to use volunteering as an excuse to slowly investigate the students. Speaking of the students, some of those students appeared by his side. It turns out to be PG, Tudor and Sancho. Looking at the building in front of them, he wondered if this was the orphanage they were going to volunteer at. Tudor wraps his arm around Vicier, telling him how lucky he was to have friends that were willing to volunteer with him, but our boy didn't want this, telling them that he didn't ask for them to follow him. Letting out a deep sigh as a nervous sweat drop drips down his face. With the presence of these three dudes, our boy could feel that things were going to get annoying. We start off this chapter when the Academy's 10-day-long holiday has started. The Golden Holiday was created due to the school anniversary Easter of the Loon Church and the weekend. The students either visit the imperial capital together or visit their families and have a great time. However, not all students enjoy this holiday. We returned to the boys when they entered the place to volunteer at. Tudor's voice could be heard loudly as he told Vicier that he was lucky his friends came with him and refused to take a break like the other students. It turns out that the boys needed to fill up their volunteering hours too. Sancho thought that it wasn't a bad idea to get it over with right now, while PG honestly just likes to volunteer. But their involvement in volunteering this time with Vicier was a burden to him right now. Looking around the place, Tudor guesses that the place they were at was the Indulgentia orphanage. He was impressed by it, as it was on a different scale since it's the largest orphanage in the imperial capital. PG adds on, telling the group that the headmaster here is the founder of the foundation for the orphans and is also an external lecturer at the academy. Sancho was surprised to learn that and wondered who it was. PG then pointed to a painting nearby them. The headmaster was called Quilty Loon Indulgentia. PG continues to tell us more about him, that he was the head of the Indulgentia family, a family from the maternal side of the Quo Vadis family. He was a popular man, and it seems like he's quite influential within the Loon Church. Speaking about the Loon Church, it was also a well-known fact that there is conflict between him and the Saintus Dolores due to their differences in religious views. As they listened closely to the story, Tudor complained and was bothered by it. After all, he didn't want to get caught up in a fight between the families. Vicier was chilling at the back as usual, thinking about what PG said, and about the popular headmaster of the orphanage. He decided that he was going to find out what this man was like once he got to know him. After wandering around, the group found themselves with the church people. A nun stood in front of the student volunteers, as the orphanage children hid behind her. As she stood there, she told the students that she would like it if the volunteers could be teachers to the children for the next 10 days, the same duration as the Golden Holiday. With a bright smile on her face, she tells the students that if they looked after the children well, then they would never forget their kindness in this lifetime. But as she tells them to treat the children with the heart of a parent, the boys are distracted by something as they all nervously stare in the same direction. Tudor points out the issue, asking why Bianca and Sinclair were here with them as they appeared by their side. Bianca immediately took offense to Tudor's question, responding with a disgusted grunting noise. Bianca justifies their presence in the orphanage, telling Tudor that they were here to volunteer, and that she should be the one asking them what they were doing here. But our boy simply replies to her that a hero doesn't need a reason to do good deeds. His reply irks Bianca as she couldn't stand the hero thing, which was expected of a Don Quixote. While Tudor and Bianca were fighting with their words, another person was sure that their meeting here by coincidence must be fate. PG and Vicier stare at a familiar gray-haired girl in front of them. Sinclair appears, with a joyous smile on her face and a bright aura radiating from her body. She looks at Vicier, all happy to see him here. She nervously approaches him, offering her hand as a greeting. She stutters in her words, saying that it was a shame that they haven't been able to talk much but hope that they will get along in the next 10 days. Vicier hesitates at first, but shakes her hand, hoping for the same thing. The moment they held hands, Sinclair rejoiced, vowing never to wash her hand over again. As she basks in her new treasure, PG whispers to Vicier, telling him that he had a piece of information for him. He reveals that he had seen Sinclair seek out the person in charge of assigning volunteers and make a request. She even inquired where Vicier was going to volunteer and asked to be assigned in the same place as him. Which could only mean one thing. Vicier thought about what PG had told him, making him think that Sinclair had approached him under the pretense of it being a coincidence, so right now he needed to be wary of her. After dealing with Sinclair, Vicier turns his head to look around. His eyes were scanning the area, which made him notice that the headmaster of the orphanage wasn't here in attendance, which made it suspicious. But as he was wondering where the headmaster was, the nun announced that it was time for the children to choose their teacher. Upon hearing those words, the children became super active and rushed forward with great energy. Tudor immediately held 2 kids in his arms, overjoyed by how outgoing the kids were. Sancho was already giving some of the kids piggyback rides, while Bianca couldn't believe how cute the kids were. Even Sinclair was surrounded by children as she read them a funny story from a book. Our boy, Vikir, on the other hand, was giving off that Ohio skibbity riz, as he questioned 3 kids on what their names were. Hearing that from him and seeing him, the kids could only have tears in their eyes and fear in their throats. Soon enough, they immediately turn right and run towards PG instead. As he comforts the children, PG tells Vikir to smile a little as a piece of advice. Thinking about it, Vikir was stunned by his interaction with the kids. After all, he didn't know because Pomerian, our sweet little angel, listened to him pretty well, but now, talking to children was pretty difficult. But as he thought about how to interact with the kids, a little kid with blonde hair catches Vikir's attention as he spots her. But then he notices that she had actually run out of the venue. It turns out that the little kid was chilling by herself at a nearby pillar. She wore a sad and depressed expression on her face, as though she was bothered by something. Vicier suddenly appears by her side. His sudden appearance shocks the little girl. He tells her that he too gets stuffy after being in a place filled with lots of people. He continues to tell her that if he isn't careful, then people might think negatively of him, so he questions the little girl on why she left the place by herself. Instead of answering our boy, the little girl simply turns her head away, making Vicier realize that his plan on talking to her had failed. As he thought about it, he remembered Ian, who told him that if he asks questions like he usually does, then the child won't reply, so instead, he should ask while smiling. Looking closely at her name tag this time, Vicier kneels down in front of the child, calling her by her name, and with a gentle smile on his face this time, he asks her if Perry is her name. Seeing this side of Vicier, the little girl's eyes opened wide as she blushed hard. But once again, instead of replying to him, she ran away from him this time. Seeing her reaction, Vicier could only wonder if he looked bad while smiling, but another person appears beside him, telling him that the little girl didn't run away because she hates him. It turns out to be the Saintess Dolores, who had seen everything. She tells Vicier that she didn't know that he had such a kind side to him, even though he was pretty gruff this entire time. Dolores reveals to him that Perry's heart had been hurt before, so she closed it this time. As a result, she had developed aphasia, a disorder that affects the way you speak, and hence, she lost her voice. Vicier could only ask what had happened to her, but Dolores didn't know the exact details. All she knew was that Perry was born in the orphanage, and in the past 13 years, she has met countless volunteers who have passed through the orphanage. At first, everyone approached Perry in a friendly manner, but after one day, they stopped coming due to their busy schedules. So Dolores figured that Perry had gotten tired from getting attached to someone in a short amount of time and then grieving their disappearance for a long period of time. But as he thought about Perry's story, the appearance of a third party coming out of the shadow made our boy panic for the first time, as he felt something shiver down his spine. Sweat started to drip down his face as he stared at what it was, while Dolores was going to ask Vicier to take care of Perry based on the way she reacted with him. But he instantly covers her mouth in a single move. The next thing we know, the two of them had disappeared from the hallway as 2 other men appeared. The guy in green was complaining to Quilty that it has been ages since they last saw each other. Quilty gives the excuse that there has been a sudden increase in people who have requested face-to-face talks with him, in order to confess their recent sins. The big bad boss had appeared, with a Fedo by his side. The man in green continued to talk, telling Quilty that he wanted to buy the exemption. Hearing that request, he replies back with, "How long do you need it for, brother?" The man replies that he wanted to buy 1 billion gold's worth as he had resented killing a barbarian slave that he had bought not long ago, who ran away. After capturing the barbarian slave, he had accidentally killed it while disciplining it. Quilty was curious that a man like him was buying 1 billion gold's worth of exemption just for killing one slave. But the man further reveals that after killing the slave, on his way back to him, he had gotten so angry to the point that he had burned a whole village of slash and burn farmers. It turns out that Vicier and Dolores were hiding from them. As he covers her mouth, our boy gently tells her to be quiet while Dolores wonders why he was doing this all of a sudden. Activating his bloodhound sense, Vicier stares and could recognize the scent that he was smiling in the moment. Looking at Quilty and the man beside him, Vicier recognizes the smell as the same one he had smelt back at the academy. The two men remained unaware of Vikir's presence, talking about how $500 million was enough to justify his actions, while the man in the green assures Quilty that the other half was a top that he wanted to give to the god that was pardoning him for his sins. Looking closely at Quilty this time, Vicier could definitely smell and see the scent of an elite corpse coming from him. As Quilty tells the man that as long as he gives generous offerings, then God will forgive him for his wrongdoings, Dolores was feeling uncomfortable with Vicier's sudden action. As she struggles to free herself from Vicier's grip, he struggles to keep her quiet. In his mind, he begs her to stop moving because they were too close to them. But Dolores wasn't going to stand still. She started to shift her weight around, pushing away from Vicier and telling him to let go. As both of them struggled to go against one another, their little fight caught the attention of Afeto, who appeared beside them with a serious look on his face. We begin this chapter at the moment when Vicier and Dolores had been caught red-handed by Afibo, who appears and spots them spying and listening onto Quilty. Seeing that they were caught, Vicier starts to think about how to get out of this situation, but then he notices something. Looking at the man staring at them with such a look on his face, the smell that was coming from him was something that our boy recognized instantly. The presence of Afibo with Vicier and Dolores made it aware to Quilty that they were hiding behind the pillar. So he happily went and greeted them with a smile on his face. Surprised to see the Saintess here, plus the fact that she might have a bad habit of hiding and eavesdropping. He even teases the Saintess, telling her if she wasn't hiding and spying on him, then she might be enjoying some alone time with her fellow peer, by having something like a love affair with him. But she was more shocked by the fact that she was caught by him. She knew that things were going bad since they were caught eavesdropping on him. But as she ponders the consequences of their actions, Quilty moves on to Vicky. Judging from his school uniform, he could see that our boy was one of the volunteers at their orphanage. His demonic green glow started to appear in his eyes as he looked closer at Vicier. At first, because of his glasses, Quilty couldn't see it because his glasses were covering it, but now that he looks at him even closer, he could see that Vicier has a really handsome face. In his mind, the elite demon wanted to capture Vicier's face in order to add it to his collection as part of his high-grade category. This is the face that he really wants. But as he thought about how badly he wanted Vicier's handsome face to be a part of his collection, Quilty was interrupted by his so-called brother, who was coughing repeatedly to catch his attention as he was waiting for too long. Seeing that he had something to handle first, Quilty leaves, bidding the Saintess and Vicier farewell as their group heads out. As they left, Vicier remained silent, but his eyes were focused on Afibo. While the Saintess was angry over her current situation, even though she had seen them buying exemptions so openly, she even had to listen to them insult the god she loves, while she could do nothing at all to stop them. In a mixture of her feelings, she immediately shouts at Vicier, questioning him on why he had forced them to hide behind the pillar, making it look like they were listening to Quilty and his brother. But as she looked at him to get an answer, the Saintess was alarmed to see Vicier in his current state. In a calm demeanor, Vicier simply apologizes to her for his sudden actions, which surprised her. He even assures the Saintess that he was going to be more careful from now on. He then turns to leave first, telling her that he had spent too much time here and needed to go back to volunteering. But to the Saintess, she was left stunned as she watched him leave, because for the first time, she had seen Vicier reveal his angry side to her. According to the research and spying that Vicier had done on Quilty Loon Indulgentia, he has confirmed that the man stays at the orphanage every day for 2 hours. His work usually consists of selling exemptions to nobles and merchants. Sometimes, he sends reports on investments and ledgers on sold exemptions to the Quo Vadis family by letter. After confirming the letters, it will be received by the head of the Quo Vadis family, Cardinal Humbert, whose full name is Humbert Loon Quo Vadis, Dolores the Saintess's father. In addition to that, Quilty is always with an escort guard during foreign affairs. Vicier had confirmed that the escort guards consist of 3 men and 1 woman who are constantly rotating themselves on duty. Seeing the 4 guards and after doing the research, Vicier was sure that one of the guards was the masked man he had met during the explosion at the orphanage. He has confirmed this theory that they were the same person as Afibo based on the smell that they were giving off. Based on all the facts so far, Vicier would assume that the other 3 guards were the same as Afibo and are at least as powerful as high-ranking graduators. This information was critical. As to Vicier right now, it was dangerous for him to go against an elite corps and 4 high-ranking graduators at the same time. As a result, in order to get rid of Quilty, Vicier needed to take care of the 4 guards before then. This marks the end of Vicier's investigation and future plans. We now turn back to our trio, who were confused by what they were seeing as they quietly whispered Vicier's name, in a concerned manner. They stood afar, watching our boy who was quietly cleaning a huge pile of laundry all by himself and by hand only. No washing machine here. They questioned him on whether he had been working too hard lately. Seeing how hard Vicier has been working all along, Sancho felt embarrassed of himself because he was going to take it easy and just use up his volunteering hours to get some points. Tutor, on the other hand, couldn't believe how hard Vicier was working for the children. Seeing him this way sparks a fire within the blonde-haired kid, as he vows to work even harder to become a true hero like Vicier. All three of the boys punched their fists high into the air, shouting out, "Everyone follow Vicier." In unison, looking at them, Vicier wipes the sweat dripping down his face, thinking to himself that he had been caught up by his own thoughts. Since it was difficult for him to move around during the day anyway, he needed to wait until it was night time to execute his plan. So since he had a lot of time to spare, he decided to give it his best during the day, doing all the tasks the orphanage needed to be done. Fast forward a few hours, the kids of the orphanage were now playing with the same ball that Vicier and the other students had played in class before, the game called Run Flat. While the other kids were excitedly playing in their teams, a single girl was sitting by herself, observing them from afar. It turns out to be Perry, who was alone right now while the kids were having fun. But then, her eyes started to shift to the side, looking at something as the sound of a ball hitting the ground was heard right beside her. There was another person sitting where she was. This time, a black ball was seen bouncing up and down repeatedly where the stranger sat. That stranger turns out to be Vicier, who was smiling to himself as he played with the black ball, catching Perry's complete attention. He knew that this trick would work. After all, even the Balak children liked playing with the ball in his hand. It turns out that the black ball was the madam's egg, which was showing no signs of hatching. Even the grip on it doesn't feel too bad. Vicier had kept it on himself just in case of certain situations but didn't expect to use it like this. He then continues on to bounce the madam's egg in front of Perry, who was completely entranced by it at this point. Soon enough, she found herself playing with the madam's egg. A bright smile was seen on her face as she did. She happily plays with the madam's egg while Vicier watches her closely. Happy over the fact that Perry had fallen for his trap. But as he watched Perry, Sinclair was watching him too from behind. She calls out to him, talking about how kind he was. Sinclair has made her appearance to him once again, mentioning to Vicier that at first, she saw him as a no-nonsense kind of guy. As she slowly approaches him, Vicier questions the lady on whether she needed something from him. She happily leans in closer to Vicier, telling him that she wanted to be closer with him, and although she was a year younger than him, she wanted to know if it's all right for her to speak to him more casually. Despite giving her the bombastic side eye, our boy eventually caves in to her request, telling her to do what she wanted, bringing a joyous smile across Sinclair's face as she got what she wanted from him. Seeing that being causal was now allowed, Sinclair prompts to call Vicier brother, but then he tells her that he finds it a bit uncomfortable to be called that. Instead of being sad over the rejection, Sinclair simply giggles, telling Vicier that she was going to think of another way to call him until the next time they meet. Which our boy simply agrees to. As the two students were busy talking to one another, Perry was still playing with the madam's egg, which moved by itself all of a sudden, causing Perry to lose control over it as it bounces away from her. In a turn of bad events, the madam's egg somehow manages to bounce its way to freedom, but escapes through a hole in the fence before bouncing into the dark and murky waters. Vicier and Sinclair were able to spot what had just happened. They made their way towards Perry, who could only stare at where the madam's egg had gone. Her mouth was left wide open over the shock of losing it. Sinclair looks at where the ball had fallen in, and tells Perry that they couldn't get it since it fell into the estuary. With tears in her eyes, she looks over to Vicier in a panic. Seeing her reaction, our boy assures her that it was fine and not to worry about the ball. But seeing the sad state that Perry was in left our boy conflicted, as the little girl tried her best to keep her tears in. Seeing what she was going through, Vicier started to unbuckle his uniform. After all, he has no choice now after seeing Perry that way. We now turn to Dolores, who was sighing deeply as she still felt bothered by what had happened before. In her mind, she was thinking about Vicier. At first, she didn't have a good first impression of him because he was judging the Night Bloodhound as someone with prejudice. Moreover, she knew how bad his behavior was because he had received enough minus points to the point where he needed to do volunteer work. But then meeting with others started to change her perspective of him. The first was Tutor, who happily tells her that since the kitchen needed more help, Vicier was the first one to volunteer to help. Sancho appears in a cook uniform, telling Dolores that until just now, Vicier had been distributing food. Since the hot water wasn't coming out, he also went out to check on the pipes. He even wasn't able to eat because he was giving out food. The next one was PG, who tells Dolores that he believes Vikir went on to help with the laundry, adding on, that not too long ago, Vikir was able to fix the pipes, so they were able to boil the laundry now. Even Bianca appears, telling Dolores that Vikir was with her, hanging clothes till now. But then the children asked him to play, so he went to prepare the gym for the kids. After meeting everyone, Dolores was confused since everyone thinks of Vikir as a good person. She had thought of her judgment of our boy as being inaccurate, but after hearing about him from everyone else, she realized that she was just flat out wrong about him. It turns out that she was the one that had her own prejudices about him. A lot of people were aware of the fact that Quilty and her were on bad terms. She starts to think that Vikir was just being considerate by hiding her with him because he noticed that Quilty was approaching them. So now, her goal was to look for Vikir and apologize to him over her misguided view of him. Soon enough, she spots him standing alongside Sinclair and Perry, as they look for the ball in the murky waters across the fence. But then something happens which leaves Dolores confused while leaving Sinclair with a heavily blushed face as she tries to cover her eyes. With his uniform and shoes neatly placed onto the ground beside one another, Vikir easily leaps over the fence in a single jump and lands deep into the murky black waters of the estuary, leaving all three ladies with a stunned look on their faces. Soon enough, the ball was in his hand. Vikir, covered in the dirty black water, had finally found the ball that tried to escape from Perry's hand. For some reason, the sun was shining perfectly in that moment, covering our boy in its holy light, activating that main character's aura and riz. He turns to the ladies, with the ball in hand, and tells Perry that now, she didn't need to feel sorry for losing the ball. His kind gesture of finding the ball back manages to capture the ladies' attention as they stare in disbelief, while blushing hard. But to the little angel known as Perry, she was captivated by Vikir's actions, her eyes totally focused on him as the sound of her heartbeat started to beat once more. Ending this chapter with a ba-dump. In this chapter with our boys playing with the kids in the open field, passing around a ball as though they were playing football. After spending so much time having fun with the kids, the boys were all sweaty and tired. Tudor wipes the sweat off his forehead, smiling as he couldn't believe that this was the last day of their volunteering. Sancho agrees, saying that time sure flies when you're having fun. Seeing that this was the last day they had with the kids, the three of them decided to go all out, meaning that they were going to play until they didn't have any energy left. As the three of them pumped themselves up, Vicier was seen sitting at the same tree, alongside Perry who was beside him. As she sat beside Vicier, her face was flushed. She even takes a peek at him, holding onto what looks like flowers in her hand. She continues to gaze at Vicier, who was mindlessly staring at nothing. Picking up the courage, she goes over to his side and lightly tosses a crown made up of flowers onto Vicier's head, which surprises him. He takes a peek at it, wondering if it was really a flower crown that she had given him, but Perry starts to shake her arms in the air the moment he says it. This time, she took one of his hands and pulled it closer to her. Instead of speaking, Perry started to write onto Vicier's hand, telling him that what she had given him was a sign of gratitude. She continues on, writing on his palm in order to speak to him. Perry thanks Vicier for always being with her during his time as a volunteer, and for finding the ball she had mistakenly dropped into the estuary from the time before. Feeling the message behind the words she wrote on his palm, Vicier tells her that his actions were nothing, and that he simply liked sitting here with her. Before she continued to write, Perry paused for a moment. Thinking about her next message, she continues to write, this time lightly. With a curious and shy look on her face this time, she looks up to Vicier, writing on his palm, the words, "Can we meet again?" Upon feeling the message on his palm, Vicier started to recall the memory with Dolores, who tells him about Perry's history, where everyone who had gotten close to her would one day stop visiting her due to their busy schedules. This resulted in Perry being tired from getting attached to people in such a short time, making her silent the way she was now. Looking at her, Vicier knew that while he was out hunting the demons, he would need to prepare himself for death all the time, so he couldn't promise her that he would come back, as death was always near him. But even though he knew that, seeing this precious child, our boy told her that they would meet again. Hearing those words, Perry's eyes started to light up with joy once again. Vicier, sincerely, promises her that he would come here if there's a tomorrow for him. Perry started to smile the widest she had ever done upon hearing those words from him. And so, she writes on his palm for the final time, that she would wait for her older brother. Feeling the message for the last time, Vicier corrects Perry, telling her to call him uncle instead of older brother. The scene then changes to the Indulgentia Orphanage Great Hall. Quilty was speaking to everyone, who turned out to be crying, telling them that the children who have been separated from their parents and are now living here, the time they had spent with them was nothing short of priceless. Through this experience, they were able to feel what it was like having a parent, and were able to fill the void in their hearts. He continues to give his speech, telling the volunteers that if the children grow up to be great people, then it would all be thanks to them. Ending off the speech, he tells them about the love that they were able to receive from the children these past 10 days, and hopes that they would share them with children. As he ended the speech, another member of the orphanage brought out a huge donation box on wheels. PG started to wail loudly as Vicier could see that Quilty had actually shown up on the last day of their volunteering. As he listened to his speech, our boy couldn't believe that he was talking about kindness with that demonic mouth of his. Quilty was skillfully triggering the feelings of respect and debt that they feel towards their parents, and asking for cash donations from these young volunteers. Vicier could also spot that he had brought all 4 of his bodyguards, which made ambushing him a bit of an annoying task. With his eyes glowing slightly red, even with the added difficulty of the bodyguards, Vicier couldn't let the demon do as he pleases anymore. After all preparations were done. As planned, he was going to hunt the elite corpse today. Soon enough, massive amounts of gold coins were given. The volunteers were queuing up behind one another, donating as much gold as they could. While they waited in line, Vicier stood out alone as Sinclair walked towards him. She questions our boy on why he wasn't donating, so he simply tells her that he didn't have any money. Sinclair was surprised to hear that an academy student didn't have money with him, but in truth, Vicier just didn't want to give money to a demon. But what piqued his interest was the fact that Sinclair had called him brother. She reminded him that she had come up with a way to address him, which Vicier seems fine with as he tells her to do whatever she wants. Moving on from that, Sinclair points out to him that he was being cold. Since they were wealthy, they should help the children. But Vicier replies back that parents are ultimately unnecessary. He continues to tell her that children may need help from their parents during their childhood, but it is up to one's personal strength in how they will tackle the world, leaving Sinclair speechless as she stares at him. In response to his depressing words, Sinclair holds onto his hand, telling him that his life must have been hard. So she offers Vicier a chance to come over to her house and play, and even eat with her family during the break or public holiday. After giving him those choices, Sinclair leaves our boy behind, telling him that she was going to the children and to free up some time once they were done volunteering. As soon as she left, Vicier looked at his hand, thinking about how strange she was as a person. According to his knowledge, Sinclair was the identity she submitted to the academy as a disguise. Before his regression, she was the most extraordinary out of the Ice Corps and always placed first in both theory and practicals for 4 years straight. But then, she disappeared after graduation and never showed herself again. And so, Quilty announces after the donation that now is the time for the children of the orphanage to give thanks to their parents for the past 10 days. Tudor cried as he hugged the kid he took care of, promising the little one that until he became a great hero, he was going to come here every week, even after he became a great hero. Sancho was on his knees, telling the kid that in the north, the children are considered most precious, as they are the future. Reminding the little boy that the empire's future was on his shoulders and that he should do well in life. PG started to wail once again, telling the children that had gathered around him that he was definitely coming back, and that he would also bring lots of yummy food for them. Even Bianca couldn't help but cry a bit as she held the little girl's head. She felt that these past 10 days were both long and short at the same time, and couldn't believe that she herself had gotten attached to the kids this much. As the volunteers started to be with their kids, Vicier stood alone at the back, silently watching everyone. He turns to his right to check and then his left. Even Dolores was there, comforting the children by rubbing their heads. Vicier sneaks up behind her and calls out her name, startling the Saintess. As she turns to look at him, her face becomes flushed with red. As she keeps seeing the memory of him being shirtless and covered in dirty water after rescuing the ball from the murky waters of the estuary from which it fell in, she wonders why she keeps thinking of that day as Vicier tells her that he had a question for her. It was about Perry. He wondered if she had seen her around lately. Thinking about it, Dolores looks around, realizing that she hasn't seen Perry here yet but was sure that the last time she saw her was this morning. Hearing that bit of information, a sudden feeling of dread overcame Vicier as he realized something. Wasting no time at all, he turns to leave as Dolores chases after him. Thinking about that sweet girl not being here, Vicier's bloodhound senses started to activate. He spots Quilty from afar, who wears a creepy and demonic smile on his face. Seeing that, fully unleashed the bloodhound within Vicier, as he stares back at the demon, with bloodlust in his eyes. Soon enough, night arrives in the city. As the boys were deep asleep, crying about their goodbyes to the kids. Vicier's bed was empty. We then turn to another building, part of the Indulgentia Orphanage Children's Dormitory, the fourth building. Inside it, the 4 bodyguards of Quilty were present, all wearing their weapons. Upon reaching a specific area, they started to part ways, each of them heading alone in their own paths. We now see Afeto all alone. As he continues his surveying of the area, only darkness remains behind him. Out of the darkness, a bloodhound appears, its eyes still glowing bright red even though it was hidden underneath a mask. Afeto immediately turns around, sensing something but spots nothing at all. As he continues to stare at the empty hallway, a voice appears in front of him, telling him that he had a question. The bloodhound appears right in front of Afeto without him even realizing it. Vicier questions the demon on where the children who were locked up for the purpose of being the elite demon's food supply were kept hidden, but Afeto didn't even respond with words but took action instead. He immediately swung his massive mace weapon to our boy. But before the attack could land on him, Vicier manages to separate his head from his body within a split second. Holding onto Afeto's head, Vicier found it funny that he asked a question to someone who can't talk. Unleashing his own demonic sword, Beelzebub, Vicier reveals that this time, there was no time for him to play with these demons as it was hunting time for the bloodhound. We begin this chapter off with Vicier holding onto Afibo's head after teaching him a lesson in the previous episode. But as our boy held onto the undead's head, he started to notice something from it. Afibo's head was starting to smoke. Without doing anything to it, smoke started to arise from mouth and ears or any kind of holes Afibo's head has. Before long, the undead's head dropped onto the ground without warning. What was left in Vicier's head was the face mask that Afibo had worn during the first night they had a fight together. Looking at it closely in his hand, Vicier wonders if the face mask he was holding on to was what allowed the undead to change his face into a fake. Once the smoke has cleared from the head, Vicier takes a look at it and recognizes who the face belongs to. It looked like it belonged to Peter, Dolores's Holy Knight bodyguard whom we met when Vicier went on to rescue the town from the Red Death. But upon closer inspection of the face, Vicier spots a mole near one of its eyes, and summarizes that this wasn't the Peter he knew. As Peter himself didn't have a mole. Thinking about this unique feature, Vicier started to recall a memory he had before he regressed into this life. Sitting at a campfire with Peter, Vicier remembered how Peter would often talk about his missing younger brother, who went missing after going into isolation training. But seeing his younger brother lying dead on the ground after having his face stolen, Vicier pieced it together. Peter's younger brother didn't disappear because of the isolation training, he disappeared because a demon went after him and turned him into an undead. Knowing all of this now, our boy's eyes started to glow beneath his mask, as 2 more bodyguards started to approach him from the darkness. Seeing them here, Vicier figured that these guys would also be somebody he once knew. The 2 new victims turn out to be the long-hair blonde and the short-hair kid. Both wielding dual blades as their choice of weapon. Wasting no time at all, they entered a battle stance, ready to face off against Vicier. Get it? Face off? Never mind. Moving on, Vicier lunges straight towards the undead bodyguards, his Beelzebub blade emitting a red aura. As he takes a swing at them, he unleashes a devastating blow filled with his bloodhound aura, but the 2 undead manage to disappear instantly, dodging his attack and reappearing at his side, managing to cut Vicier by a bit as blood was spilled in the air. Vicier and the 2 bodyguards started their fight, causing an explosion to occur and dust clouds to fill the area, making it hard to see what was going on in their battle. In the meantime, our attention is shifted to a statue of a goddess. A familiar face and voice was heard and seen, as she held her hands in a prayer manner in front of the statue. Dolores started to chant the following words: Our Loon, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth, as it is in heaven. Forgive us for our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. Let us not into temptation but deliver us from evil. Speaking of temptation, as she spoke out about her prayer, the innocent girl couldn't help but fill her mind with the images of a shirtless Vicier, covered in dirty water while basking in the glorious rays of the sun from the time he rescued the ball from the estuary for Perry. Dolores finally snaps out from her prayer, confused and embarrassed over why she kept thinking about our boy even in this moment. Seeing that she couldn't concentrate on her prayer, she decided to leave, reminding herself to keep calm and relax, lying to herself that Vicier was just a good junior. But the thought of him and the Night Bloodhound only kept her confused as she was unaware of her own feelings. Thinking deeply about it, she was soon attracted by some noise coming from a certain direction. Looking to spot what it was, she sees a figure emerging out from a dust cloud as an explosion was seen as well. Taking a closer look at the mysterious figure, she recognizes the pandemic mask he was wearing. It turns out to be the Night Bloodhound she was searching for. But seeing him here all of a sudden made it confusing for Dolores, as she wondered what the Night Bloodhound was doing in an orphanage. But more importantly, she wonders why he was busy fighting against Quilty's bodyguards, who were storming straight at him without any signs of stopping. In the midst of their fight, Dolores shouts at the words Night Bloodhound, catching Vikir's attention as he turns around to see that the Saintess was behind him. In that moment of distraction, the bodyguard manages to land a devastating blow to our boy, stabbing him in the stomach, through and through, sending him flying past the Saintess as she sees him on the ground, completely knocked out. Transforming into a human shield, Dolores stood in front of the bodyguards who were walking over to finish the job, her arms spread wide as she told them to stop. Even though she didn't know what was going on between them, she wanted to at least talk about it first. Dolores, who held the title of Saintess, was left stunned and confused as the bodyguards didn't even reply to her command but instead, prepared themselves to strike her down as well. Instead of running away, she chose to stand firm and confident in her choice of defending the Night Bloodhound, closing her eyes so she doesn't have to see what was coming at her. But as she did, Vikir's voice was heard once again, telling her to move aside. In a mere second, the Night Bloodhound had recovered his strength and healed from his wounds. He managed to block the strikes from the bodyguards, using Beelzebub to stop one attack while using his arm as a meat shield to stop the remaining other. After hearing his voice, Dolores opens one of her eyes to see that the Night Bloodhound had appeared in front of her, saving her life in the process as he handles the incoming attacks. But her face was soon filled with panic and concern after spotting a blade entering into one of the Night Bloodhound's arms. Underneath the pandemic mask, Vikir's eyes were glowing bright red, meaning he was in killer mode as he told the Saintess that everything was going to be alright. As revenge for dealing a painful blow to him, Vikir unleashes a mad flurry of strikes, destroying one of the bodyguard's swords into pieces right in front of its face. Before the long-haired one could respond, our boy managed to plunge Beelzebub deep into his throat, slicing and ripping it apart as an endless wave of blood poured out of it. Without any concern over his fellow brethren, the remaining bodyguard didn't waste any time and attempted to strike Vikir down, believing that his only weapon was now stuck inside his former dead companion. But that turns out to be fiction as Vikir charges Beelzebub with even more bloodhound aura, allowing him to slice through the neck of the bodyguard completely in one swing before turning his attention to the other one, slicing off his head as well in a single swing. Get wrecked, son. As the blood of the bodyguard splattered everywhere, Dolores was standing still, her body shivering over what she just witnessed, the artwork of the Night Bloodhound. After slaying both of them, Vicier was covered in their blood as he watched over the dead corpses laying at his feet. Dolores watches him closely before snapping back into reality. She shouts at him, wondering if he was really alright and that they needed to treat his arm. But our boy simply tells her not to worry about it. Underneath his mask, he takes a peek at her. Vicier couldn't believe that the Saintess was here so late at night. Seeing that the situation was pretty chill right now, she questions the Night Bloodhound about why the bodyguards attempted to attack her, as she was sure that they would know who she was. He responded by telling her to look at the thing he was pointing at. The bodyguard's head started to melt like a Phoebos with smoke coming out from every single hole in its head. The disgusting sight left Dolores to cover her mouth in order to not puke at this sight. While the Night Bloodhound explains and reveals to her that Quilty's bodyguards were undeads who were using the face of other people. Dolores was shocked to learn this fact, wondering why something like this is happening to the people who were affiliated to the Quo Vadis family. Hearing that, the Night Bloodhound tells Dolores that she should know the truth more than anyone else in the world. Those words triggered something in her as the Saintess realized what was going on with Quilty. As the fake faces start to disappear and turn into the face mask that Ephibo wore, Vicier takes a closer look at the faces they were using. He sees a familiar face, believing that this person was Staffordshire Baskerville, a member from the Pitbull Order and the one that followed Vicier when he went to visit the Morgue clan. Recalling the facts, Vicier knew that when he disappeared in the forest, Staffordshire was able to avoid expulsion because of Adolphe Morgue's defense, so he had voluntarily gone into isolation training instead. Vicier was pissed off, sensing a common pattern between the undead whose faces they had gotten. He then takes a look at the other bodyguard and spots a tattoo near its collarbone. Looking at the tattoo, he suspected that this bodyguard was originally from the Don Quixote family. He started to think about Set, who had also gone into the pretense of isolation training. People from prestigious families who cut contact with outsiders. That's when the pattern appeared. The key to this was isolation training. He then recalled the triplets from the Morgue clan who informed him that they were about to start their isolation training and that Camus, who was previously in isolation training, had left and entered the Hall of Darkness, devoting herself to magic research. Piecing all the clues and information he had, Vicier started to think about another worst-case possibility as someone appears with fire magic in a wrapped hand. Before he could react, a massive fire explosion was set ablaze right in front of Dolores and the Night Bloodhound. The explosion didn't seem to stop there as more explosions appeared, destroying everything and everyone in its path. It turns out that in the midst of the fires, Vikir manages to protect the Saintess from the blast by using his cape as a shield from the flames. But then, both of them were alarmed to see something. Someone else had appeared, walking slowly through the flames. A familiar red-haired lady, the last of the bodyguards, has finally made her appearance to Vikir. The moment he spots that familiar red hair, past memories of his time with Camus started to appear in his head. The lady, who wanted to be his wife, now stood in front of him, eyes focused and intending on killing him as she casted another fire spell in her hand. Is this our waifu, turned undead? Find out in the next chapter. This chapter begins in the aftermath of the previous fight, with flames surrounding everyone. The undead lady who looked like Camus started the fire with her magic, her hand pointed towards Vikir, who had managed to safely protect Dolores from the sudden bombardment of fire magic from before. Even with the intense heat coming from the fire magic all around them, it doesn't beat the heat coming from Dolores, who stares at Vikir, her face flushing bright red as she sees that the Night Bloodhound had protected her again. Snapping out of her delusional love, Dolores looks ahead, telling the Night Bloodhound that she could sense the attacks coming to them were filled with malicious intent. But she also noticed that the attacks weren't just targeting him, it seems to be aimed at her as well. Knowing that, she asks the Night Bloodhound if the lady in front of them was an undead too, like the other two bodyguards. Hoping that this wasn't true, Vikir simply replies to her question that there might be a chance the red-haired lady was an undead. Hoping to confirm the fact, Vikir asks her about when the Camus look-alike had joined Quilty. Dolores promptly replied that she had joined him quite recently. Taking the moment to absorb everything that was happening to them, Dolores, in her prayer stance, tells the Night Bloodhound that she too serves God. And if her opponent happens to be an undead, then she couldn't just stand there and do nothing. So she was willing to support Vikir in this fight against her. A holy support has been added to the party, but our boy, as an alpha wolf, turns down her idea. Telling her to stand down as he moves towards the undead lady as he had something he needed to check. Hoping to help him with just a bit aid, Dolores offers to cast healing magic on Vikir, but he declines the offer. But before Dolores could fight back against his decision, the undead lady started to cast another set of fire magic as sparks appears in the palm of her hand. Soon enough, multiple lances appeared in the air before her, all aimed towards Vikir, who was walking straight at her without any sort of protection from Dolores. As the fire lances were launched at him like torpedoes, he easily cut all of them apart before they could do any sort of damage towards him. The pieces that were cut flew past him and ended up exploding in the air, but all of this didn't bother Vikir, as he was in deep thought. Even though there was a fire-casting maniac trying to kill him, all Vikir could see was a lady with long and straight red hair, casting magic that at least looks like 6th class level, who uses both steel and fire in her attacks. As he returns Beelzebub to his wrist, Vikir knew that the people who can control that level of magic at such a young age was rare in this continent, even in the Morgue family, a prestigious magic family. Speaking of steel and fire, the undead lady summons even more of the steel lances from before, aiming and firing towards Vikir, who was now walking towards her without Beelzebub in his hand. This time, he didn't even cut down the steel lances and simply allowed them to hit him, covering Vikir in a large fiery explosion. Out of the flames came Vikir, completely unharmed by the attacks from her, even managing to catch one of the steel lances in his hands. He continues to make his way towards her slowly, not even bothering to dodge the steel lance attacks as some of them managed to cut his shoulders. One of the steel lances even manages to blow pieces away from his left side, but he still continues to move forward, unfazed by everything that was happening to him, unafraid of the steel and fire attacks. Even Dolores, who was watching from the back, noticed that the Night Bloodhound was purposely taking on the attacks from the undead, making her question why he was doing so. And if it was because he knew who the undead was. What was more important to her was what kind of relationship did the Night Bloodhound have with the undead they were facing. Even in the face of death, Vikir continued to walk towards her, not even defending himself anymore. The nearer he got to her, the more he started to think about the time before he regressed. A flashback starts in his head. Vikir knew about the good relationship Camus had with her uncle, Adolphe Morgue. Which meant that she wouldn't have left the registry and gone into isolation training in the Darkness Hall. But as he started to recall all the moments they had spent together in this life during their childhood, Vikir started to regret the fact that he had approached her in this life. Thinking back about their conversations, regretting the fact that he had started a relationship with her, and eventually even used her for his own plans. Camus Morgue, her face suddenly cleared to him. As he stood in the flames that were trying to kill him, Vicier started to think about the decisions he had made after regressing, some of which may have caused the bright future of the hero known as Camus Morgue to disappear. As he finally stood face to face with the Camus undead look-alike, Vicier wondered what the hell had he done to cause this situation. Sensing a chance to attack while Vicier appeared distracted, the undead started to cast another flame spell in her hand, but our boy managed to grab her wrist before she could go any further. As he pulls her arm down to prevent her attack from reaching him, Vicier immediately grabs onto her face with his other hand. In a swift motion, he removes the mask that all the undead were wearing in order to see her true face and to confirm what he was afraid of. Dolores, her mouth left open, was stunned to see what was going on as the mask was ripped from the undead's face. Even Vicier, underneath the pandemic mask, had a bizarre reaction to what he had seen. Unwillingly to stop even after having its mask removed, the undead started to cast the flame spell once again in her hand, aimed right towards Vicier, who was about to take it at point-blank range. Without hesitation this time, he pulls out Beelzebub and slices the head off its body, stopping the undead from unleashing its fire spells anymore. As the flames that were surrounding them died down, all that was heard in the area was the sound of the undead's head bouncing on the ground after Vicier had severed it from its body. The undead, now completely dead, laid on the ground, without any signs of life. Seeing that the job was done, Vicier finally kneels down in pain, slowly recovering from the attacks he had taken without defending himself. Dolores could see the horrible state he was in and rushed over to his side. With the amount of blood and wounds covering his body, she could obviously see how injured the Nightblood Hound was, and casted her holy healing magic on him immediately. As the two of them watched over the undead's body, Dolores took the chance to ask him if he knew who she was. Vicier, underneath the mask, took a moment, thinking about what he was going to say before revealing to Dolores that he didn't know who this undead was. Phew, thank the goddess. Sensing that most of his injuries were healed, Vicier slowly stood up, telling Dolores that she had done enough and that his current state was fine enough. But as he stood up, Dolores tried to argue back that he hasn't been healed fully. Feeling that she shouldn't push it, she questions the Nightblood Hound on the reason why he was fighting to the point he had become so injured, and whether he was willing to tell her the truth. Once again, Vicier paused for a moment, before telling Dolores that he was demon hunting, leaving her in a state of shock as he reveals to her that this was his personal vendetta. Moving on from that, he walks over and picks up the mask the undead was wearing. Looking at it closely in his hand, Vicier had wondered what was exuding so much strong demonic energy. It turns out it was the masks that the Quilty guards were wearing. Seeing that he had collected all four of them, Vicier was going to take care of them now. "Hey, give me the relic," said unknown voice, causing both Dolores and Vicier to immediately turn to see where it came from. A nasty-looking mouth had appeared in the stomach of the undead Vicier had just slain. The mouth talked about Ephibo, Hebe, Pedo and Geronto, the names of the four bodyguards, and how it had borrowed them from a certain woman, who was now going to be freaking mad about what had happened to them. Ignoring the words coming from out of it, Dolores was still in shock over how a huge ugly mouth had appeared on the undead's corpse. While she was still in shock, the mouth continued to speak, questioning Vicier about whether he was the guy who had been attacking the branches that were in his jurisdiction lately. Hearing the question, Vicier tells the elite corpse that he shouldn't be asking questions that he already knew the answers to. Taking it a step further, Vicier reveals to the elite corpse that he knew its true identity, which was Quilty. Hearing him say that, Dolores could finally make sense of who the voice belonged to and recognizes it as Quilty's. Seeing that he had finally been exposed, Quilty laughed over the fact that he had been caught by the Saintess. Instead of being afraid, Quilty smiles over this, saying that knowing about what he truly was, is much better. For the great cause, he needed to give up on his identity as Quilty. However, the Saintess had now found out. Since it would make others wary of him, Quilty avoided laying his hands on her, the Saintess. But now, he has a reason to do so since they knew what he was. Dolores, after discovering that Quilty was a demon, started to tremble. Seeing her in that state, Quilty was amused, hoping that her expression was filled with despair and fear when he took her face next. But then, a yellow aura started to appear around the Saintess as she held her hands together for a prayer and started to chant. Her face, filled with hope and courage, illuminated the area with a bright yellow light as she chanted the words, "The light of my life, the fire of my existence, and my sin in my soul, I will make those who are wicked feel the weight of their karma twofold." before shouting the words holy light as a massive pillar of bright light showered down upon Quilty, causing him to scream out in pain. He could feel the divine power coming from Dolor's prayer slowly burning him away as he continued to let out cries of pain and suffering. As the pillar of holy light disappeared, so did Quilty and the undead corpse he had taken control over. What remained was simply a pile of burnt and black ashes. Reflect in the afterlife, you demon, shouted Dolores after finishing her prayer and holy magic attack on Quilty. But as she said those words, an image of someone licking his lips appeared. He couldn't believe that Dolores was saying those words with the kind of expression she had on her face, right before a powerful green attack punctured through Vikir like nothing, so fast that even our boy couldn't react and defend himself in time. The unknown figure starts to walk towards them as Dolores kneels down to help the Night Bloodhound from the surprise attack. The man who licked his lips turns out to be Quilty, who finally reveals himself to them. He appears in a mocking tone, telling the Saintess that she shouldn't have interrupted him with that prayer since it was bad manners. Using herself as a human shield, Dolores tries to block Quilty from reaching the Night Bloodhound, who was in the midst of recovering from his surprise attack. She even takes the chance to scold Quilty for daring to wear the cloak of a saint while committing such wicked things. But he simply tells her that he did what any demon would do before questioning her on whether she wanted to fight him. Her voice trembles and stutters as she tells the demon that yes, I am going to fight you. But seeing the state they were in, Quilty mocks them, asking her if she thinks an inexperienced and immature saintess, along with a swordsman who was on the brink of death, would be able to go up against him. An elite corpse. As he touches her face, he could see that Dolores was forcing herself to act like she was strong. After all, he could see fear dripping out of her expression this round. With a sickening look on his face, Quilty screams at the Saintess that she couldn't fool anyone with the face she had on right now, a face filled with fear and horror. Quilty's mouth started to drip with saliva, his eyes completely focused on the fact that he was about to have the face that he always wanted for so long. It was literally in his hands. But in the next moment, a familiar sight appeared, with Beelzebub entering his skull from the bottom of his chin, leaving him confused. Vikir's voice could be heard as Dolores turns to look at the Night Bloodhound. Vikir reveals to Quilty that he had been following his traces, which made him realize a few things about the demon. First was that he was a coward who would easily sacrifice his subordinates. Second, he was a coward that didn't fight for himself. Third, Vikir figured out that Quilty wouldn't reveal himself as long as he remained uninjured. So all this time, our boy had pretended to be hurt by the surprise attack, revealing to everyone that he had already healed from the attack a long time ago, and that healing an injury like that was nothing. This was all part of his act. Even with a blade through its thick skull and its eyes rolling backwards filled with blood, Vikir questions Quilty about how his acting was. In the next moment, Quilty's eyes changed back to its bright green demonic side, staring right at Vikir even with a blade in its head. Laughing over their situation, he tells Vicier to call him Dantalion instead, throwing away the name Quilty before calling Vicier a damned method-acting brat. Start off this chapter with Dolores looking all shocked and stunned by what just happened. A brief recap: even after piercing his head with Beelzebub, Dantalion was still able to talk. While Vicier was lifting him by the head, Dolores collapsed onto the ground, stunned at the fact that Dantalion was still capable of talking with a sword through its skull. Seeing how the demon was still alive, even Vicier was taken back by a bit, recognizing that the title Elite Corpse isn't just a title. Looking closer at our boy, Dantalion figured out that he was the one that killed Andromalius, the Elite Corpse that had infiltrated the Baskerville family. Seeing that the face of Quilty has been damaged, Dantalion reveals another face he was hiding in the back of the face he is wearing. He smiles even though he had lost the face of a clergyman. As he rips away from Quilty's body in a new female body, Dantalion reveals that he collects people's faces and in doing so, is able to absorb their memories and their life, allowing him to act all innocent. He continues to laugh at Vicier, telling him that the one he killed was none other than Quilty Lune Indulgentia. And it was just one of the many faces that he owns. Unless Vicier can kill all of the faces he has in his arsenal, then he will never be able to kill the Elite Corpse, Dantalion. Hearing that, Vicier immediately leaps towards the demon, telling him that he was going to do as he says. Vicier was going to kill every single one of the faces he has. And so, Vicier manages to stab the demon straight through the stomach this time. The moment his blade pierced the body, something weird was going on as Dolores watched the scene unfold before her eyes. The body that Dantalion had stolen, its owner had come back. With tears in her eyes, she begs Vicier to save her as she didn't want to die. Even as blood filled her eyes and dripped from her mouth, the young lady continued to beg Vicier to spare her from this pain. Before long, the possessed body collapsed onto the ground in front of them. As the dead body laid there, a sound of something ripping and morphing could be heard from its corpse. Not long after, another body appears, ripping itself free from the young lady. This time, the man looks around, all confused and wondering where he was. He started to recall the fact that the last thing he remembered was buying meat pies that his daughter likes on his way home. But before he could finish his sentence, Vicier, without an ounce of mercy, simply slices his head off from his body, telling Dantalion that he was being too arrogant. The next body that appeared started to cry as a reflection of a young boy could be seen in the lens of Vicier's pandemic mask. Dantalion had chosen a child this time, crying towards Vicier and telling him that he was being too mean. Rubbing his eyes as he walks closer to Vicier, the young boy complains to Vicier, telling him that he didn't do anything wrong and questions him on why he was bullying him. Even with all the crying, complaining and childish voices, Vicier wasn't bothered by it at all and told Dantalion to stop his act. Remembering the memory with Andromalius, who could also change his face and voice to the people he killed, Vicier had already gotten immune to such acts by the demons, and was no longer affected by them. After revealing that fact, Dantalion finally shows his true demonic side once again, smiling after knowing that Vicier was a stone-cold killer and that his changing of faces didn't affect him at all. But the demon has a hidden card up its sleeve, telling Vicier to check something out as his finger starts to morph into something sharp. Something shoots out of it, hitting Vicier's wrist even before he could react to it. By the time he looked at what it was, a piece of Dantalion had attached itself to our boy. Right before having his head sliced off, the young boy smiles, telling Vicier that what he had gotten was a present from the elite corpse. As soon as the body was pushed backwards by the blow from Vicier, Dantalion started to morph and change in the middle of the air, twisting and turning his current body before landing in a new one. As he looked over to Vicier, he couldn't help but laugh. It turns out that something was happening to him, everything around him started to blur, and the feeling of pain and nausea was taking over him. After just a few seconds, Vicier kneels onto the ground, in pain as Dolores watches over him with concern. Dantalion, with even more eyes and mouths on his face and hands, laughs at Vicier's current situation, revealing that he had planted a face onto Vicier's wrist just moments ago, and that right now, he was going to show him the face's memories and emotions. Dantalion continues to reveal to Dolores and Vicier that the face he had planted into him was someone who suffered from paranoia and schizophrenia, resulting in him killing his precious family. Which made him wonder what Vicier was feeling. After all, he was going to have the memories of two people clashing in one body. Dantalion was hoping that Vicier's memories and the face's trauma would mix, and that his consciousness would begin to perish as a result. But something unexpected catches the demon's attention as he stares in wonder. Dolores, covering her mouth in shock over what the bloodhound did. Vicier had actually sliced his own arm off before the face's trauma could mix into his mind. Dolores was concerned over his missing arm, but Vicier assured her that everything was fine as he started to recover. He shows off his freshly healed arm, telling Dantalion that even though he was hunting a demon, he was not your average human. Looking at what Vicier did, the demon started to understand why Andromalius had actually been defeated. Looking closely at the sword that Vicier was wielding against him, he could see that it was emitting demonic energy, which meant that it was Beelzebub. Adding on that Vicier had the aura of a graduator of the highest grade, Dantalion realizes that he was not going to be an easy opponent to fight head-on. So he smiles after thinking of another way to deal with Vicier and starts to morph his hand into something else once again. With his creepy hand, Dantalion starts to point it at the duo, but this time, instead of attacking Vicier like before, he aims his creepy finger at Dolores, shooting it at her at lightning speed. But something else was faster. Our boy. He steps in and manages to defend Dolores from the demon's surprised attack. But all of this was planned by him. He smiles, knowing that Night Hound would protect the Saintess, and realizes that he was fighting with a weakness right beside him. As Vicier continues to defend and block the incoming attacks all aimed at Dolores, she tells him to not worry about her and continue his fight against the demon, but our boy couldn't do that. As he didn't want to lose the hero's pillar. After all, Dolores played an important part in the fight against the demons in his previous and future life. She couldn't fight back against Vicier's words, and continued to watch a fight that was so cruel and scary to her. She could see that the Night Bloodhound was fighting alone right now, and wonders if he was going to continue to fight alone in the future as well. Gripping her hands tightly together, Dolores knew that she needed to solidify her resolve, but she was so scared right now to the point that she couldn't stop shaking. But even with all those negative emotions, the girl was ready to jump in the fight and help the Night Bloodhound. Finally, holy light started to be casted once more, but before she could continue, A piece of Dantalion was tossed right in front of her, breaking her concentration as she looked at it. The pile of meat, containing pieces of eyes and mouth, started to speak to her, calling Dolores sister. The image of Quilty's face started to appear in her head once again as fear and horror overtook the saintess, breaking her courage that she took so long to gather before. Panic and fear was all she had right now, as she couldn't do anything anymore. Dantalion, on the other hand, was smiling in his fight against Vikir, calling it too easy as his arms changed into tentacles covered with ghostly faces. The demon knew that having one person transplanted into another body was already painful enough, but he couldn't help but wonder what would happen to a human when hundreds of humans are transplanted into one body. The tentacles filled with the souls and memories of the victims the demon had killed started to make their way towards Vikir, who braces himself for the upcoming carnage. Even in the face of millions of enemies, Vikir simply tells Dantalion that he was going to cut them all down. Just like he said, Vikir started to slice and dice the tentacles that were near him, cutting them down endlessly without even stopping to catch his breath. The demon was impressed by the feat that he was accomplishing, but mocks the Night Hound, wondering if he was going to cut thousands of faces up. Ignoring the demon's taunts, Vikir continued to do what he does best. Slicing and dicing the endless waves of faces that were coming to kill him. But as he cuts through the attacks, something catches his eyes in the midst of the battle. Amongst the faces that he had cut, one of them looked familiar to our boy. A face that we had recently been introduced to. Memories started to flash in Vikir's mind, recalling the time that he had spent with a precious young orphan during his volunteer days. Thinking of that face in his memories, it matches the face he had just slain. This was one of the rare moments where Vikir was fearful of something, as he slowly realizes that the face belonged to Perry. Because of that single moment of lapsed judgment, Vikir stopped attacking and was slowly consumed by the endless horde of faces. The light of the night bloodhound was soon covered by the deadly faces of Dantalion. We begin this chapter after Vikir had lost concentration in the battle. After seeing that Perry had been absorbed by the elite demon Dantalion, our boy ended up being absorbed too. We now see him alone, in a place different from where the battle took place. Even in the endless darkness and being alone, Vikir's face was not filled with despair or fear but a confident look to ensure that the demon will die by his hand. But looking in front of where he was, Vikir spots an endless amount of people, sitting on the ground in a neatly formed rows at a place that looks like a sewage area where water was flowing constantly past them, but they remained seated, not even raising their faces and being unbothered by the water. Looking closely at his current situation, Vikir recalled that he had been swallowed up by Dantalion's skill, making him believe that his current whereabouts was somewhere inside of the skill Dantalion had cast on him moments before. Seeing the endless rows of people sitting on the ground, Vikir grew nervous as a sweat drop appeared on the side of his face, thinking that these people were the ones that had been eaten up by Dantalion. As he continued to look at them, a sudden wave of pain started to surge in his body, forming veins that could be seen clearly on his face. The purple mist started from his legs as he remained submerged in the waters of the sewage. The mist was not stopping at all as it continued to spread around his body. The waters of the area started to flow even more fiercely, as Vikir recognized the feeling he was having. It was the same disgusting feeling that he had gotten when Dantalion's face was pieced together on his wrist like before. He knew exactly what the purple mist represented. It was the traumas of the people in front of him. All of their traumas were now flooding into his body. A young boy sat in the front of the rows, his face clearly missing as a small voice was heard, begging for something to stop as it was hurting him. Hearing those pleas, Vikir places his own hand on the young boy's head, as a way to comfort him, kneeling down even though their traumas were flowing into him endlessly. As he comforted the boy, Vikir couldn't help but recall seeing Perry's face amongst the faces he had cut from before. So if the people that Dantalion had eaten were all here, then amongst these endless rows of humans that were eaten, Perry's body should be here as well. The people sitting on the ground continued to voice out their pain, saying that they were scared and exhausted. Some wanted to die right away, others lost all hope to live anymore. All kinds of negative feelings were displayed by them, all in front of Dolores who stood before them. Seeing them and hearing what they were feeling, Dolores' knees became weak as she kneeled onto the ground, realizing that these were all the vindictive spirits who were eaten by the demon known as Dantalion. The moment she mentioned his name, the elite demon appeared right behind her, asking her how she thought about the situation before him and revealing that the people sitting in front of her were the collection of human souls that he had eaten so far. Dantalion finally appears in his true demonic form, a white form with green eyes with 4 tentacle-like ears appearing on the side of his face, with eyes and mouth split in half between them. He smiles widely and happily tells Dolores that he had been selective since he didn't want to eat ugly humans. Hearing the sounds of weeping and despair, the elite demon was instantly turned on, asking Dolores if their sounds were resonating in her heart as well. More information about the demon is revealed: risk rating with S+, unknown size, site of discovery was the Gate of the Fall, deep underground and in the snake's lair. The ninth corpse, natural enemy of humans and, being invulnerable and immortal, one of the 10 disasters. Dolores finally spoke out against the demon, asking him how he could commit such sins, even with the children from the orphanage. But the demon didn't see anything wrong with his actions, saying that there was no need to justify their reason for eating food. And proudly declares that he has no sins while looking for something in his jacket. He takes out a glowing holy piece of paper, the paper that exempts one from sins. The demon laughs and smiles while showing it off to Dolores, telling her that he was exempted from any sins since he had this paper. He couldn't help but laugh at the fact that a human idea in which sins can be sold in exchange for money was something that even demons couldn't dream of doing, giving Dantalion a sense of thrill. He continues to reveal that with the idea of using the orphanage as a supply and demand for his food, he simply raised the livestock and applied the supply and demand on the food. Proudly saying that if he had a sin, then it would be that he had learned a lot from the humans. The demon continues to mock Dolores, calling her a bad and wicked human as well. Whispering in her ear that she was just lucky to have been born with divinity, but the fact was, she was so weak on the inside, that she had become useless and a burden to those around her. Dantalion continues to taunt the Saintess, mocking her that if it wasn't for her, then it would have been impossible to trap the Night Bloodhound in his underworld. It was all thanks to her, for being his Achilles heel. Seeing her current state, Dantalion was extremely pleased with himself, as it was always so thrilling for him to see the Satyans speechless. His underground engulfs the negativity of the dead. So right now, he was extremely excited to see the negativity tainted all over the Saintess's face. Dolores started to turn her head, telling the demon that he was right, and that everything he said so far was true. From the exemption that humans gave for sins to be exchanged for money, for being allowed to harm others for their own convenience, even her own shortcomings, along with all the weaknesses that humans possess. She admits that all those things will combine, and in the end, create an environment of despair. Dantalion was reaching peak climax as the Saintess seemed to finally agree with his own words. His spiked mouth opened widely as saliva spilled everywhere. But wait, there's more. It turns out that the Saintess was not in despair, as a bright golden light envelopes her body, with tears dripping down her face. She tells the demon that humans also possess the strength to believe that they can move towards a good path, even when in despair. Dantalion immediately took a step back from her, covering his body with his hands as he was shocked to see the divine power coming from the Saintess. It turns out that she was being infected with negativity like he had hoped for. Thanks to the demon, Dolores finally understands just how indecisive she had been up to this point. She couldn't enforce abolishing the exemption because she had been scared of her father, and that she couldn't help the Night Bloodhound because she was terrified of Dantalion. Dolores knew very well how useless she had been this entire time. But then, a certain person once told her something. A flashback is seen where Dolores and Vikir were sitting on a wooden fence together. She asks him a question, about why did God choose a weak person like her to be the Saintess. She knew that there were not many other people with strong faith, even if they weren't born with divine power, making her question God, why she was bestowed upon a title of Saintess, a title that she felt she didn't deserve at all. God chose you because you're troubled and sorrowful, said Vikir in response to her problems. He continues to tell her that because the person this world needs only shines through when they reach the lowest and fiercest places. To everyone watching this video, never give up. The flashback ends, returning us back to the present where Dolores held her hands together in a prayer form. She couldn't let the Night Bloodhound, who fought fiercely against Dantalion alone, fight by himself anymore. So right now, at this very moment, Dolores needed to do what she could for him. Seeing the powerful divine power radiating from her, Dantalion started to panic over how the divine power would react to his own abilities. So he decides to fool her, telling the Saintess the humans he had eaten so far can still live, but souls refined by divine power cannot. Even after hearing those words, Dolores closes her eyes and focuses on her power, no longer being swayed by the words of a demon. In the midst of her prayer, a small hand reaches out to her, holding her hands. Dolores opens her eyes and sees a young boy standing in front of him. Soon after, more little kids from the orphanage appeared behind the young boy. All of them were smiling and waving happily towards the Saintess as they were covered in her divine power. Recognizing who these kids were, an endless wave of tears started to pour down from the Saintess's eyes as she looked at them, apologizing to the children of the orphanage for not being able to save them. Seeing the children gave her the final push she needed as she let out a powerful ring of divine light all around her, bringing light into this dark and horrible place. In another place, a familiar person was spotted sitting alongside the victims of Dantalion. It really turns out to be Perry. She sat on the ground, her face completely void of any feelings as her eyes showed no signs of life in them. Vikir quietly sat behind the young girl, telling her that he had finally found her once again. As he sat there with her, Vikir started to talk to Perry, telling her about how he was wondering why he had wanted to see her again. It turns out that he had something he wanted to tell her something. As he said this, Vikir's body was slowly crumbling away due to the amount of traumas he was taking in, but still, he continues to talk to Perry. He reveals to her that from now on, he was going to spend his remaining years taking revenge on demons, and that the reason why he had visited the orphanage was in order to hunt down Dantalion. He didn't think about what he would do beyond that. And yet, during the time he had spent in the orphanage, from the moment he had met Perry, Vikir realized something after seeing her angelic smile. If there was one thing that would make this revenge of his meaningful, then it was that Vikir wanted to create a world where he can laugh in the future with children like her. As Dolores's powerful divine power started to reach the place where Vicier was, he gave a final thanks to Perry for creating meaning in his plan. And told her that he was sorry for not being able to protect her. Even though Vicier was slowly losing his life, Perry's voice reached out to him, telling our boy that she was glad that he had come and saw her once again, bringing life back into Vicier's eyes as he heard those words. Turning around, Vicier could see the endless rows of people, their faces filled with life once again, especially Perry, who continued to smile at him. But she couldn't help it as tears started to flow down her face once again as she told Vicier about how scared she had been. The divine power of Dolores was healing and casting away any signs of demonic power within Vicier whilst giving life to those that had been the victims of Dantalion. Wasting no time at all, Vicier immediately pulls Perry into his arms, giving her the biggest hug he could. As they hold one another in their final moments, Vicier promises Perry that he will never forgive the man who made her cry. Hearing that, Perry started to smile, telling Vicier that what he said was now a promise between them. The divine power of Dolores showed no signs of stopping at all as its light radiated so brightly that it could be seen outside the building they were in. Even Dantalion was alarmed by the power, questioning since when had the Saintess been this powerful, belonging that she had finally awakened her powers. Once more surprising, was that she was able to purify all the souls he had in his underworld. From out of the light, came out Dolores and the Night Bloodhound, no longer affected by the demon's abilities. Dolores continues to let out her power, engulfing Vicier in its holy light. As he basked in all of its glory, our boy started to notice a change in his body. He could sense that the Baskerville aura he had was overflowing, all thanks to the Saintess's divine power, which was exponentially increasing his aura. With the help from Dolores, Vicier believed that in this moment, he could do it now. He can now reach the next level. From 6 spheres of aura, Vicier started to form the 7th in his core. The aura covering his hand was in a gas-like state, but as he focused, it started to solidify. Dantalion immediately recognizes the change that was going on with Vicier, seeing the solid aura that was now covering Beelzebub. To the horror of the demon, Vicier had finally reached the next stage. He was now a sword master. With his newly acquired powers, Vicier was about to go on a rampage, his anger maxed out as he promises the demon that he was not going to have an easy death.
We begin this chapter where we left off. Dolores was now acting as Vicier's support. She stands in the back casting her holy magic to buff Vicier to the point that he had achieved the Swordmaster stage, allowing him to turn his aura into a solid state, wearing it like a form of armor against their fight with Dantalion. In the midst of their battle, the Holy Saint could feel it. The sadness of countless children being sacrificed, their feelings of anger and hatred towards the demon who sacrificed them, and the emotions felt by the Night Hound, all of those feelings were now being shared with her in their battle against evil. She recalled something that the Pope had said to her a long time ago, that the Saintess can be awakened by meeting her true companion, and that meeting is right here, right now. Clasping her hands tightly together, she becomes determined to give all the divine power she had to the Night Hound, her true companion that she had finally found. The spell she was casting is called Soul Resonance, a blessing where the Saintess can give their divine power to the soul companion they acknowledge and temporarily raise their stats. The Night Hound, or rather our boy, Vicier van Baskerville, could feel every inch of the blessing's power coursing through his veins, amplifying his abilities to the maximum, allowing him to reach the supreme domain. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the moment the first Swordmaster awakened amongst his generation. basking in all his glory. Dantalion was afraid. He couldn't believe with all his demonic eyes that he was witnessing the emergence of a swordmaster. Sweat began to drip down the demon's head, as he knew that amongst the humans there were only a select few who could reach the swordmaster's level. Even though he knew that Vicier formed a threat, Dantalion thought that he only needed to be careful around him, and that the ones he should fear the most would be the patriarchs of the noble families who should be swordmasters. He couldn't believe that the young child in front of him was able to meet the qualifications of a swordmaster. But as he was busy in his thoughts, Dantalion's view of Vicier suddenly went upside down, leaving him to wonder what was going on as his head was sliced up and flipping through the air without him even knowing what happened to him. With just a single swing of his blade, Vicier sends numerous slices of aura through the air from a distance, cutting and dismembering Dantalion into pieces. As his body flies everywhere, Vicier appears in an instant and stomps onto the demon's mouth, reminding him that the souls he had collected have disappeared after being purified, which means that the tricks he can use have disappeared since he was now faceless. With all this information and seeing his current state, Vicier taunts the demon, telling him that he must be experiencing fear and despair, like the countless victims he had killed before. And that was true. Dantalion was in full panic mode. He didn't even notice Vicier's attacks anymore, and believed that this was where he was going to meet his end. In order to open the gate that connects to the demon realm, Dantalion was ordered to save up mana, which made him believe that he could conquer the human world soon. But he didn't anticipate that there was a single human who kept getting in the demon world's way. Leaving the demon with no other choice, Dantalion decides to kill Vicier, even if he has to put his own life on the line for the sake of the plan. Something starts to happen, as Vicier was quick to notice that the fight didn't end here. Dantalion's face started to morph and change as he mocks the Nighthound, telling him that he wasn't done yet. Revealing a new gigantic form, Dantalion reveals that he still had one face left to play as he towers over Vicier. He declares to everyone present that he was going to self-destruct in order to take them down with him, even the people who were staying at the orphanage at this time. The demon was in serious mode as even Dolores could feel his dangerous aura pricking her skin from where she stood. Panic starts to set in her mind as she tells the Nighthound that they needed to do something quick in order to protect the area. In a calm manner, our boy simply tells the Saintess to chill. Even in the face of a massive bomb, Vicier assures the Saintess that there was nothing to worry about. The reason was because he was sure that he could reach it now. Before he had regressed, Vicier had yearned to reach the level he was at his entire life. Vicier believed that he could reach the sword that Hugo had shown him from before, where he ripped the sky in half with a single swing of his sword. Dantalion started to go off, shouting out to his fellow brothers that he hopes that they carry out the order for the fall of the human world. But before the big explosion, a distortion happens. Vicier has done it. He unleashes the strongest strike that he knows now, cutting the demon bomb right in half in a single swing. But the attack doesn't end there. Vicier's strike could be seen from outside the building. A red streak of light appears in the middle of the night, exploding in the sky. Every volunteer in the orphanage could feel the tremors of Vicier's strike. PG woke up, all confused about the earthquake they were experiencing right now. We turn back to the Saintess, who believes in what the Nighthound had told her. She remained calm up to the point she opened her eyes. What she saw left her in awe, leaving her weak in the knees as she collapsed onto the ground. Vicier had done it. He was able to follow in Hugo's step. Instead of a big fat demon bomb, what remained was an open view to the night sky after the clouds had been forcibly split apart. Sinclair gazes out the window of their lodging, her face struck with awe as well as she witnesses the beautiful night sky, wondering what it was, remaining unaware that this was all because of one man's skill. That night, the incident at the Indulgentia orphanage engulfed the imperial capital in fear. Another terror attack had struck the Quo Vadis family's orphanage. Just like the previous incident, the Nighthound was identified as the culprit, and the crowds started to gather at the scene of the crime. Bianca couldn't believe that the Nighthound was where they were as she looked at the crowd forming. Sinclair finds it scary, as a terror attack happened at exactly where they were staying. PG couldn't believe that all that happened on their last day, while Tudor calls it a shame, as he thought that he missed his chance to catch the Nighthound in order to prove his qualification to be a great hero. Sancho was surprised over the fact that he heard that there were no casualties, which was unusual to him. PG reminded Sancho that the headmaster, Sir Quilty, had gone missing since yesterday, along with all of his bodyguards. This meant that they might have been fallen victims of the Nighthound's terror attack. Looking at Dolores as she walks past them, the group of student volunteers believe that she must be very distressed over this news. Pietro was accompanying Dolores as they made their way through the orphanage together. He was struggling over the news he heard from her, about the fact that Quilty, someone he thought just had uncomfortable traits, was actually a demon in disguise, added on the fact that the Night Hound was actually the person who resolved the situation, and not the one that caused it. Pietro finds that ambushing a branch of their family was unforgivable, but he found it personally refreshing that he had cut off a rotten section of their family. But he knew that even if this was the truth, he wasn't sure that the public would accept it. Having been silent during their entire time together, Dolores decides to make a move, walking past Pietro and telling him sorry for what was going to happen from now on. She stood in front of the news reporters, thanking them for being here, and asking them to listen closely to what she has to say next. The news reporters were surprised to see her in front of them, spreading the news that the Saintess had something to say about the incident. As more of them begin to gather in front of her, Dolores starts to take out a book she had hidden in her clothes. A memory surfaces from the night of the battle. Vikir could be seen handing her a book, telling Dolores that it contains the truth about the Quo Vadis family, and that she should be the one to decide what to do with it. Wasting no time at all, Dolores starts to read out loud about what was inside the book from day 0 of month 0, the sales log of the exemptions and indulgences, the addressor Quilty Lune Indulgentia, the consignee Cardinal Humbert Lune Quo Vadis. Viscount Vecoin murdered his parents due to them wanting to donate all of their assets instead of passing them down. He took their assets after disguising their deaths as accidents. All of his sins were forgiven after paying 1.5 billion gold in cash. She goes further, talking about Baron Lasso, how he murdered his maid after doing wicked things to her, then burying her in the sewer. All of his sins were forgiven after paying 200 million gold in cash. Sir Fig, he murdered his partner in order to monopolize their investments. His sins were forgiven after paying 800 million gold in cash. After shouting out the sins of the donors, the news reports were alarmed to hear this. They couldn't believe that the church would sell exemptions to demons like them, but some of them didn't believe what Dolores said, thinking that Cardinal Humbert wasn't the type of person to do such wicked things. Hearing the mixed reactions from them, Dolores continues to read out loud the sins the people have committed and paid to be free of them. Next up is Count Azel, who had evaded approximately 100 billion gold of taxes, and was free of his sins after paying 300 million gold in cash. Dolores continued to read each and every one of the entries in the book she was holding, no longer stopping even if she was scared of her father, because she wanted to be someone that a certain person wouldn't be ashamed of. Dolores further declares to everyone that she personally believes that the buying and selling of sins with money should be considered blasphemy against God. She continues to swear that such brutalities will no longer occur in the Quo Vadis family. Far away from her, Vicier was seen sitting at the same place where he used to spend time with Perry. Even from here, he could hear what Dolores was saying clearly. Gazing into the afternoon sky, Vicier realized that even after he had regressed, her righteous heart still hasn't changed one bit. After the battle with Dantalion, Vicier knew that there were only 9 elite corpses left. Even after defeating one of them, Vicier had a hint of sadness in his eyes as he looked down, slowly rubbing the seat with his hand and swearing out loud that at the end of his journey in this life he was going to create a future where children like Perry could live and laugh with all the joy in the world in their hearts. As he left the place where he had spent time with her, a cross was seen with Perry's name tag and the flower wreath she had made for Vicier laid there neatly, a reminder that a young beautiful girl called Perry had existed in this world, and that he hoped that she could finally laugh peacefully. After the sad but happy ending with the previous chapter, we begin this one at a familiar place back in the academy. We turn to the professor's laboratory, under Mr. Banshee Morgue, where a familiar voice could be heard, asking about why the article she wrote isn't in the papers. Dolores appears, wearing her school uniform, her face angered as she questions someone. She tells them that she had only written the truth, and only the truth, and yet the article that only criticizes the Night Bloodhound gets put on the paper instead. It turns out that Mr. Banshee Morgue was the one she was arguing against, or as I would like to call him, Professor Snape. Hearing her concerns, he simply questions the Saintess if she was really asking because she didn't know the true reason why her article couldn't be placed in the papers. He takes it out on the table and points out to her that what she wrote was particularly aggressive against a certain organization. Hence, the Academy chooses to be politically neutral. The article was written with the words, "Are the Night Bloodhound attacks truly unwarranted? The darkness behind the Holy Quo Vadis household." She shouts back at the Harry Potter character imposter, telling him that she had simply written the truth as it was. But Professor Snape shakes his head, reminding her about how her own father, Cardinal Humbert, had denied all these accusations, and that the leaders who are on the exemption list also claimed that all of these facts she wrote about them were false. Feeling trapped by his words, the Saintess tries to argue that she had the records from the exemption lists that the Night Bloodhound had given to her previously, but all the professor could see was a list whose source hasn't been verified, so they didn't know if it was truly real. Hearing the way he kept trying to knock her down, Dolores finally questions Professor Snape about why he supports the Quo Vadis family so much, even asking him if there was someone else pressuring him to do so. Her words seemed to hit the target as the professor fell into a deep silence. His eyes were lost as he thought about her words deeply. Pausing from his seat, Professor Snape reveals that there was no need to lie to her anymore, and reveals that he had been asked to set the focus of the recent paper on highlighting the terrible actions of the Night Bloodhound. Even the headmaster of the academy was quite baffled by this request. Dolores couldn't understand it, asking the professor if her father, Cardinal Humbert, was really that powerful, that he could even give the headmaster enough trouble to be bothered by it. Professor Snape smirks at that thought, telling her if it was just her father, then he himself would be enough to stop him. A sense of dread overcame Dolores, as she understood what Professor Snape meant by his words. She knew that there was only one person who outranks Cardinal Humbert in the Quo Vadis family, and that was the Pope, the ultimate leader of the Church and the person closest to God. Thinking about it, she knew that even if all others were to fall into darkness, the Pope alone would remain pure of heart and righteous. But there have been rumors going around that say that the Pope's judgment has been clouded as a result of his age, which might allow Cardinal Humbert to use it to his advantage, controlling him to do what he wants instead. Pushing that aside, Professor Snape reminds her that her article is not fit to be put in the newspaper, as the article she wrote suggests that it is in support of the Night Bloodhound's actions. He even tells her to keep in mind that the Night Bloodhound is a criminal, someone who has been committing crimes lately. Keeping her words back, Dolores knew that the Night Bloodhound isn't a bad person. The ones that are truly evil are the Quo Vadis members and the demons that reside within them. She recalled what the Night Bloodhound had told her, that there were still demons existing in their world, and that he had been fighting all of them by himself, a lone warrior against pure evil, who is determined to carry it on forward till his dying breath. Seeing that this was a losing battle, Dolores decides to leave the laboratory first, but as she did, Professor Snape reminds her to not look into this matter any further. Thanks to talking to the professor, it made her realize why the Night Bloodhound didn't come out with the truth to the public. Even though he was risking his life to fight all the demons all by himself, even though she lost the battle to place her article in the newspaper, Dolores won herself a new sense of purpose and confidence, which is to help the Night Bloodhound. We now turn to Tudor, who is seen stretching his body as much as he could. The boys were walking back to their rooms as Tudor complained about how tiring it was to study outside like this, and knew that volunteering wasn't cut out for him. Seeing how they were done with volunteering and studying, Tudor places his hand on Vikir's shoulder, asking him if he wanted to follow the group as they were going to practice the game run flat. But our boy declines the offer, saying he wasn't feeling well and needed to spend some time alone. The words "time alone" triggered something in Tudor, as his face was filled with fear for some reason, while PG happily tells everyone that he was going back to his room as well. Tudor, in an instant, covers the little boy's mouth, telling Vicier that having some time alone was an important thing, and that they'll hold on to PG in the meantime. Even after seeing the weird reaction from him, Vicier still agrees with what they were doing. Alone in his room, Vicier finds it perfect since he hasn't gotten any time alone since his fights, to the point that he couldn't even unpack the things in his bag. Thinking about the previous night, Vicier's swordmaster rank, which he had reached with the help of the Saintess's blessing, had returned to its original state, high-rank graduator since that day. Even though he lost the swordmaster rank, Vicier still felt great. He had gotten the feeling of what it was like as a swordmaster, which was good enough for our boy. Rummaging through the bag, Vicier still had the best thing he had gotten from the fight, which was the thing he had taken while fighting Dantalion's bodyguards. It turns out to be the leather sack he had gotten from killing each of the bodyguards. Placing the 4 sacks together would allow it to transform into one large mask, and if Vicier remembers it correctly, and he did, turns into the mask of degeneracy called picaresque, which has fratricide, which means killing one's own kind, and degeneracy stats. Vikir couldn't believe that he had gotten a relic that rivals the demon sword Beelzebub in his hands. He had read all about this thing before his regression. This is a mask that gets stronger as the wearer kills more of his kind. It is said that the more humans you kill with this mask on, the more powerful you become. On top of that, it would allow the wearer to gain insane resilience and mana regeneration. Feeling a sense of adventure, Vikir decides to try it on, even after knowing that there were some sort of side effects that come with the mask. A sudden surge of power started to be seen from his eyes the moment he placed the mask on his face. Vikir could feel its power. His health and aura, which had been depleted from the fight with Dantalion, were immediately restored. Its power was different from the Swamp March salamander skill he had stored in Beelzebub, which could only help with lost limbs. The mask helps Vikir to recover from fatigue as well. But something weird was going on. Looking around where he was, our boy felt that something was off about his situation. Taking a look at the table and bag from before, he started to wonder why everything in his eyes started to look bigger. Not only that, everything he sees so far is in white and black, no colors. Instead of words coming out from his mouth, a small and cute woof noise came out of a little puppy who was seen where Vikir was sitting last time. Our boy realized it. He had turned into a dog and guessed that this was the side effect from the mask. I mean, it makes sense. He comes from the Baskerville family, which is filled with people having dog names in their own names. Feeling the panic and trouble in his situation, our boy started to run around in circles, in dog form, thinking about how bad it was going to be if he can't return back to normal. He needed to get the mask off his face somehow. As soon as he thought about how to get the mask off his face, it came out on its own, reverting Vikir back into human form as he stood naked as the day he was born inside his room. As part of the fan service, I'll let you guys stare at this specimen for a few more seconds. After removing the mask from his face, Vikir was glad to discover that it comes off his face when he thinks that he wants it removed. Looking at it as it laid on the ground, the side effect of being turned into a dog when he wanted was now a perk to Vikir. Thankfully, in the academy, there was no rule saying that students couldn't keep animals in the dorms, so this perk could help him in sneaking around without suspicion. But as he was thinking about how to use the side effect to his advantage, a cracking sound could be heard. Vikir could sense it coming from the bag, grabbing his attention. He takes out the Madam Eight Legs egg, which is now cracked. Seeing that it was cracking, Vikir recalled how the egg had moved back then. It was a sign that it was about to hatch. Knowing about Madam Eight Legs, who is a high-ranking monster that Vikir almost died multiple times to while fighting against it, he knew that even the ancient demons that command hell didn't want to fight against this queen, so they decided to give her a place to live in the depths instead. And yet, in his hand, the descendant of that monstrous queen was about to hatch. As soon as he thought of it hatching, a little spider came out from the egg, barking out sounds like a dog for some reason. Vikir stares at it, and couldn't believe that this little cotton ball is the madam's descendant, and was confused on why it was barking at him. The little cotton ball continued to bark and make dog noises, leading Vikir to believe that it learnt to do it when it was being held by a wolf. Soon enough, the little spider started to signal something at Vikir, with its sad eyes while moving its body sideways. Our boy took it as it was trying to say that it was hungry. Placing a piece of meat on the table instead of eating it, the little spider started to shake its head in refusal. Seeing its reaction to the meat, Vikir guessed that it might be too young to eat meat like the madam. Even so, he finds it as a win. Getting to own an S-rank monster from the dense forest is a good opportunity for him. Seeing how the little spider couldn't eat anything in the room, Vikir decides to head out and look for some food. But as he was roaming the corridors of the academy, a voice caught his attention. Someone was scolding, saying that a commoner shouldn't muddy the academy's waters. Hiding behind a pillar, Vikir spots a group of bullies surrounding our boy PG. Watching the situation closely, Vikir spots his friend in trouble and slowly recognizes the people bothering him. The main bully turns out to be Granui de Leviathan of the Fire Corps, who comes from the poison-wielding Leviathans, one of the 7 pillars that make up the Empire. He's known as a top student of the Fire Corps freshman, and he's exceedingly proud of his status. All this information was given by PG, our human dictionary of information. Sensing trouble brewing, the human dictionary makes the right move, smoothly sailing away from the bullies and using the excuse that his friends were in the toilet and waiting for him to get away from them. But one of the bullies stopped him from exiting, telling him that a commoner shouldn't be going away so simply. Granui appears and calls him worthless. speaking about how he was just a low-rank expert, and that just his mere presence in the school was enough to annoy him. He also finds it an insult that someone like him, a member of the 7 great families of the Empire, has to walk in the same halls as a commoner low-born peasant like PG. With a disgusted and arrogant look on his face, the main bully declares to PG that he didn't belong in the academy, and that he should leave it immediately. He even goes as far to say that the people PG hangs out with were probably at the same pathetic level as he was. Hearing those words, something awakens in the timid young boy, his eyes filled with a profound sense of rage as he grabs Granui by the collar, startling the bully, as he didn't expect this from a mere commoner. With fury in his words, PG holds him up, telling the bully not to insult his friends as he did before. Feeling more annoyed than ever, Granui wonders what PG was going to do about them, and turns to the others, ordering them to make a mess of our boy. Immediately taking on the orders, one of the bullies goes straight for a punch to PG's face, who could only close his eyes as the incoming fist was coming for him. But as he waited for the fist to hit his face, nothing seemed to happen, so he slowly opened his eyes to see what was going on. Tudor had appeared in front of him, holding the bully's fist in one of his hands while asking PG if he was all right. Soon enough, a muscular hand filled with veins appears and grabs the top of the other bully, who could feel it, as a sweat drop appears on the side of his face. Sancho appears as well, with red glowing demonic eyes. He grips the head of the bully tightly, causing him to scream in pain while telling them that if they wanted a fight, then they had chosen the wrong person. PG couldn't believe that Tudor and Sancho were here to save him, and after turning around, he could see that even Vicier had appeared to help him out. Granui was annoyed to see Tudor La Mancha Don Quixote intervening in his plans as the bullies were regrouping themselves. Tudor, Sancho and Vicier had gathered onto PG's side as well. They found it weird that their little boy was taking too long, and didn't expect to find him in this situation. All 3 of the Gigachads were now officially pissed off, knowing that there was someone in the academy that dared to lay their hands on their start off this chapter with an intense staring match between the 2 groups. Group 1 is filled with main character aura, while the other group is filled with random NPC aura. Granui looks at them with a smirk on his face, telling Tudor that after seeing who he hangs around with, he clearly understands his standards now. He adds on that he knows Tudor's worth by simply looking at his commoner friends that surrounds him. The blonde hero reminds the bully that in the academy, nobles and commoners were not differentiated, meaning that all students who enter the school are to be treated equally, regardless of their backgrounds. But Granui brushes that fact away, telling Tudor that he can't do anything about it, especially since he couldn't do anything during the Nighthound incident. Throwing that in, struck a chord with the blonde hero as he tried to justify that he was sleeping during that time. Granui could only laugh about that, telling Tudor that losers always come up with some sort of excuse, releasing gas from his body as his friends put on gas masks on their faces. Granui proudly claims that if he was there during the incident, then he would have been able to catch the Nighthound. The group are alarmed to see an endless amount of gas coming towards them from the bully's side. Tudor tries to cover himself from the gas using his arm, asking Granui if he intends on showing off his skills inside the school. While the hero was panicking, Vikir stood calmly at the back, smelling the gas and thinking that it was some sort of paralytic. Even the little cotton ball, a descendant of Madame Eight Legs, started to sniff the air, following Vikir's actions and breathing in the toxic gas. Granui calls him Little Action, something cute, indicating to Tudor that this threat was simply to show him a difference in their strengths. Seeing the reaction of Tudor's group, the bully starts to mock them, telling them to fall into despair after feeling the gap between their strengths. After all, in his eyes they were ignorant fools. But as he was saying those words, the little cotton ball opened wide, and within seconds, without Vicier understanding what was going on, the gas that was spread all around them started to be sucked into the little madam, as though it was a vacuum cleaner. Vicier looks at baby madam, shocked by the speed of how she was absorbing the poison fog. He starts to think that she likes to eat poison as food, and as soon as she is done sucking in the poison fog, Vicier quickly covers her to hide her from everyone present. After opening his eyes, Tudor was confused by what was going on, as the poison fog was no longer present around them. Seeing that nothing else was happening, Tudor realized that they were scared for no reason, and believed that Granui still possessed a tiny bit of logic in his small brain, recalling his attack before anything worse happens. But even the group of bullies were confused by what was going on, as they didn't expect Granui to stop in his attacks. Grenouille, after seeing what happened, was the most shocked by the current situation. Staring at Vikir, who for some reason is leaking poisonous gas from inside his shirt, thanks to baby Madam, Grenouille believed that he had seen the fog suck towards Vikir just now, but thought that he had seen it wrongly. Instead of fighting against Tutor's belief, Grenouille acts along with it, declaring to him smugly that he had bestowed upon them a generosity that was deeper than the abyss, and that using poison on the Ice Corp's idiots, whose brains are made of muscles, was a waste. Taking the fight to the bully this time, Tutor walks towards him, calling out Grenouille for how he kept looking down on them this entire time. In a menacing tone, the blonde hero threatens the bully, asking him with a death stare if he wanted to have a go between them. He marens them about the team event that was in the upcoming midterms, and declares that the team with the lower score will run around the academy naked. Hearing that, Grenouille easily agrees with the bet. He turns away, all smug, and accepts Tutor's proposal, as he couldn't wait to see them all become the laughing stock of the academy, something fun to watch. After the bullies had left them, PG went up to Tutor, apologizing to him for getting into this mess and taking the blame for it. But to Tutor it was all good, since he personally wanted to crush Grenouille's ego for once in his life. Even after hearing that, PG started to cry. He believes that he wouldn't be of any help to them for the bet, since he only saw himself as a low-rank expert. The blonde hero places his hand on the little man's shoulder, assuring him that it was fine, since he was smart, and along with his ability to observe is amazing. As the group headed off to where they were going, Tutor explains to them that the midterm team event requires a 4-man team, so Sancho and him will take the front, while PG will be located at the Spirit Tower in the middle. And as for our boy Vikir, who showcased his excellent skills in using the bow and arrow, will be taking up the vanguard. With their positions and skills, Tutor was sure that they would get a high score, and since it was them, there was no way they could lose to Grenouille's group. Hearing that gave PG a new sense of confidence as he agrees completely with Tutor's plan on winning the midterm event. But his sense of confidence was cut short as Vicier raises his hand in the background, revealing to the group that he had already formed a team with someone else, and would pass off the chance to be with them in the midterm event. The entire group were shocked to hear this. So Vicier repeated the fact that he had already formed a team with someone else, and that he couldn't break it off as promises were important to him. All three of the boys were in complete shock over this shocking fact, while in their minds they were hoping that at least Vicier could read the room and understand their issue. But all of this was not clear at all to our boy, as he remained clueless over what they wanted from him. The scene then changes to showcase an arena. It was filled with students from all the branches in the academy. They were cheering loudly, screaming at the top of their lungs over what was going on. It turns out that Dolores's team had entered the stage, a celebrity amongst the students. As they cheered even louder upon her appearance, they screamed at her over how she looked amazing this year, and that she was the capital's pride. Undeterred by the screams of adoration from the students in the stand, Dolores remained focused, her eyes unwavering from the test before him as she donned her armor. Here's a little background on what is going on. The Colosio Academy's midterms will be shown to outsiders. There are a total of 3 subjects in the midterms: a team test to evaluate defense, an individual test to evaluate offense, and a theory exam, painful for most students. In today's defense test, hologram magic is used to manifest a dungeon inside the arena. Teams will battle against dummy monsters that are veiled with dense earth golem hologram magic. As we see now, massive ant-like monsters were being created in the upcoming battle for the students to face off against. The blue symbol on the student bodies was a shield magic that veils the students' bodies, will receive a fixed amount of shocks, and will appear as a score on a board far away. The students will form parties of 4 and defend against a monster wave. Grades will be evaluated based on contribution and how long they endure. The hit points or HP given to students will decrease every time they are hit by a monster, and when their HP reaches 0, the test will automatically end. There are 3 rounds, each round being 20 minutes, and if they can hold out for 1 hour, they will receive full marks. The best grade for this term came from the 3rd years, as the crowd were amazed by the performance of Dolores' team in their match. The party of the school president, Dolores, held out for 58 minutes, unfortunately, but they obtained the best record among the 3rd years. PG started to write down his notes, informing the group that since the graduating 4th years aren't taking this exam, then Miss Dolores's party had set the best record for this midterm. He continues to talk about how normally the 3rd years reach the 3rd round and the 2nd years reach the 2nd round, and so he determines that if their group holds out for 20 minutes, then they will be at the top of their year. But Tutor cuts in, reminding him that 20 minutes wasn't something that they could be satisfied with. Tutor states that in order to crush Granui's ego, then they would need to at least get halfway through to the second round. As he said that, another student appears, telling Tutor that he would at least get that far, because with her in their team it wouldn't be a problem. It turns out that Bianca had joined the boy group as their archer. She confidently tells the boys to make sure that they tank well so that the monsters don't rush at her. As a thank you, she would then get all the monsters for them. Sensing the arrogant tone in her voice, Tutor reminds the archer that this was a team event, not a one princess and three slaves event, and with his naked body on the line, he wanted her to act appropriately, and with sincerity, Bianca tells him that she herself didn't want to see his naked body either, as her eyes will rot if that happens, so she urges him to do well during the event. Sancho cuts into the tense atmosphere, reminding them to fight the enemies in the arena and not each other. The two of them quickly stop their fighting, annoyed at one another, while PG was thinking to himself that the two of them, Tutor and Bianca, surely don't get along. Staring at the sky above them, PG wonders why Vicier had to join a different group. As he was thinking of him, we turn to Vicier, who speaks out loud that he doesn't like to be the center of attention. He stands in a commander-like stance, telling the people before him that even though some stuff had happened that resulted in him getting some attention, he figured that it would be bad if he receives any more than this. So he tells the people to go crazy, to the point that he didn't have to do anything. Three familiar-looking people responded with the same words, "We will protect you with everything we have so you do not have to do anything, my liege." It turns out that the group Vicier had promised was the triplets of the Baskerville family. Once again, we'll call them High, Middle, and Low, from top to bottom as their names to make things easier. All three of the brothers were excited as this was their first mission from their liege, so all three of them knew that they needed to do well. Meanwhile, the original boy group were stunned to see who Vicier had teamed up with without them. As they were watching him, the bully makes his appearance again, calling Tutor a bastard while believing that he had ditched the commoner Vicier, and recruited Bianca from the Usher family, an obvious thing in order to win. But even after seeing the new team, Grenouille de Leviathan was still confident that it would be impossible for him to win against them. After all, he himself had recruited an ace on their team. Another familiar person makes her appearance, calling Grenouille as Gregru, and telling him to stop laughing so wickedly. The bully looks back and quietly corrects her, saying his name is Grenouille. He even tells her that she should be grateful that a commoner like her had been accepted into their group. Sinclair wasn't inclined to do so, but assured him that as their new team member she would do her best for their grades. But once again, she messes up in pronouncing Grenouille's name, making him angry as he corrects her once again. While she remains curious about which group Vicier had joined, Grenouille leads the team confident that his group, Group 69, would take the #1 spot amongst all the first years, while in Group 108 was Vicier and the triplets Team Baskerville. In Group 109 was the original boy group, with backup Bianca. Leading them was Tutor, hyped over the upcoming test. The midterms of the first years had begun. We begin this chapter with the crowd of students roaring loudly with their cheers as their voices are filled with excitement. In the center of the arena, there was a platform, covered by a powerful blue shield. We turn to Team Baskerville, where Vicier was looking at what was going on with a perplexed look on his face. Thinking about it, he recalled that in his past life, he couldn't remember seeing the Academy's exam, and only understood that students just needed to be decent at fighting. But as he was thinking that, High was quick to notice the look on Vicier's face. Seeing that look of confusion made him ask our boy if he didn't have any information about the exam. So he started to break it down. When students step foot into the arena, a virtual reality magic circle will activate, and the area will change into a dungeon. The exam starts when the monsters start charging at you. Although the exam looks simple, and you only need to hold out until your HP drains to 0, the poison that the monsters excrete is real, although it would be much weaker than the original poison. But even if the students were not physically hurt, they still needed to be careful, as their HP could decrease from the poison that the monsters would give off. Hearing about the poison used in the exam, Vicier was curious about whether it was real. High tells him that he had heard rumors that if something were to happen, then the instructors would lift the magic wall and interfere in the exam themselves. Seeing how much information they had, Vicier was curious if the triplets had practiced this type of exam before. After asking that, the triplets reveal that while he had been away from the family, the three of them were practicing several times in the estate's drill hall. Seeing that the triplets were confident and well experienced in this exam, Vicier decides to leave it to them, ordering the three boys to go crazy so he doesn't have to move an inch. The triplets were excited to receive that command, repeating in unison that they were going to protect Vicier as his iron pillars. All three of them were excited to carry out their first mission from their liege. As they were talking, Tutor and the boy band made their way over to where they were. Seeing Vicier, he asks if he had prepared properly for their upcoming exam. Taking the chance while the triplets were focusing on their new mission, Tutor sneaks beside Vicier, asking him if he was all right, since he was in the same group as the Baskerville triplets. Sensing the worry in his tone, our boy tells Tutor that he wasn't forced to group up with them. Instead, they just really wanted him in their team. But the blonde hero couldn't believe it. He itches his face closer to Vicier's, whispering to him if he was truly safe and not being bullied into doing something he didn't want to. Vicier corrects the misunderstanding, revealing that the triplets and him had discussed the team up several weeks ago when they said they needed information about monsters. As they are talking, PG hears the announcement of the end of a round for the exam. The announcer had revealed that the first year's group number 68 had ended. The next group to head into the arena for the exam is group 69, which belongs to the bullies, as Grenouille's face appears, happily smiling to himself over the fact that it was his group's turn. With the other two bullies by his side and Sinclair at the back, Grenouille happily announces to them that it was time for them to go wild. As soon as his group entered the arena, the ant-like monsters started to make some noise and headed straight towards them. Seeing a huge wave of monsters coming right their way, Grenouille turns to Sinclair, shouting at her on whether she was ready with her spells or not. Slowly opening her eyes, Sinclair had a serious look on her face for once in this story. She calmly tells Grenouille that her spell was now complete. Focusing all her power into unleashing the spell, Sinclair sends a powerful wave of magic in the air before him, tackling and attacking all the ant-like monsters that stood in her way. Her amazing display of magic skills caught the attention of the crowd as they cheered her on. Vicier was watching her match closely as well. Seeing the way she was performing in the exam, he understood why a commoner like her had claimed the top student rank in magic. But after seeing how skilled she was, Vicier couldn't help but wonder why she didn't do anything during the fall in his past life, when she had become a famous mage in the future. After casting magic one after the other, the round ends for Grenouille's group as the announcer proclaims the end of Group 69's exam round. All the members of the group were exhausted by the time the round ended. Grenouille's group, Group 69, had the best record among the first years, a record of 19 minutes and 55 seconds. After hearing the announcement of his group's score, Tutor and the boy band had mixed feelings about it. Tutor himself was angry, as he couldn't believe that Grenouille's group had actually gotten the newest best record amongst all the first years. In the midst of his anger, his sharp eyes spotted something below in the arena. It turns out to be Grenouille, who has a smug look on his face as he wags his finger in the air, clearly taunting Tutor, and telling him that he was looking forward to seeing him run around naked. It turns out that every member of the boy band had seen what Grenouille was doing down below. Their anger rose tremendously, as their eyes gleamed back with massive amounts of hatred towards him. For the next group, it turns out to be the Baskerville clan with the triplets leading the charge. As they entered the arena, Tutor and the others loudly shouted out words of support to Vicier. While everyone else was cheering, the triplets were focused, their gaze honed onto their objective, which is to take first place, the position that suits their liege the most. As Bianca and PG watch closely, she notices something with Vicier and wonders about it. She asked PG if our boy could actually use the bow, which according to PG's information is true, as it was recorded that Vicier was the Ice Corps' ace for the bow and arrow. After finding out that bit of information, Bianca's interest in Vicier's bow and arrow skill increased. She looks forward to seeing how well he can shoot. And so, as the monsters for the exam were created, Vicier aims and lets out a wave of arrows towards them. PG and Bianca were watching closely, and they were shocked to see the insane speed that Vicier had fired off with. To Bianca, who was a known archer, Vicier's speed was insane. But that was all. After watching him for a bit longer, she could see that Vicier's arrows were only fast but weak, and they all lacked accuracy since most of them simply went past the monsters. Seeing the way he was shooting, Bianca still felt that something was off about what Vicier was showing them. This turns out to be true, as underneath the thick glasses on his face, Vicier's bloodhound eyes were activated. Posing for another shot, Vikir aims an arrow but this time covers it in the red powerful Baskerville aura. With just a single shot he manages to blow one of the monsters into complete pieces, but it all turns out to be fake as he was imaging it. He recalls his arrow, thinking that if he had used his actual skill, then that would have happened instead. He could definitely feel his body itching to show off. As the battle went on, he remembered a memory with Ayin. He recalled the time she had taught him how to use the bow and arrow like the Balak tribe, and after teaching him, she made him swear a promise to never lose to anyone with the bow. Remembering that, Vikir couldn't help but smile and laugh, apologizing in his head to Ayin for breaking the promise. As everyone was distracted with the battle, Vikir took it as the perfect moment to bring out baby Madam. She happily escapes from Vikir's clothes and hops nearby to the closest monster corpse that was giving off poison. Seeing it made her so happy, as the baby Madam's eyes immediately glowed and shined brightly. While she was busy having the time of her life, Vikir was happy that she was. After he had heard that the ant monsters could excrete poison like Granui, he basically figured out that the exam was an all-you-can-eat buffet for baby Madam. And seeing how she was feasting so much, it turns out that Vikir was right. And so, he decides to leave her alone till the exam finishes. With the sound of the timer going off, it marks the end of the exam for the Baskerville boys. Sadly, all three of the brothers were kneeling on the ground in disappointment. Their group's result for the exam was a record of 19 minutes and 50 seconds, which made them rank second amongst the first years. Granui, on the other hand, was laughing like a mad clown after seeing the result they had achieved. Him and his group of bullies were laughing their butts off while being in the stands. Granui was confident that there was no way a commoner like Vikir could beat him. Thus, after seeing the results, he would surely know the difference in their skills. As he and the bullies continued to mock Vikir, Sinclair was chuckling along in an uncomfortable manner, telling Granui that he looks like a third-rate villain. All three of the triplets immediately took a blade to their necks, apologizing to Vikir for not being able to take first place, so as their punishment, they would take their lives instead. But he immediately tells the brothers to stop it. After all, second place was still pretty high of an achievement. As they leave the arena, the announcer tells everyone that the next group up is Group 109. It turns out to be Tutor and the boy band. As they head into the arena, they were discussing Vikir's group results, which was a pretty high score, but their goal was above that, after all, in order to beat the record of 19 minutes and 55 seconds that Granui's group had set. Tutor and the boy band's aim is to clear the first wave. And so their exam started with Tutor destroying an ant monster with a single blow from his spear. Sancho leads the front with Tutor as backup, while PG gives out the orders. In the back, Bianca shoots off any remaining ant monsters she spots with her bow and arrow. Even Vikir was astounded to see the teamwork they were giving off. Tutor and Sanko fight the monsters at the forefront. Bianca supports them from the rear, and PG gives out orders while observing the whole situation. Judging by their great teamwork, it seems like Tutor's group had prepared themselves thoroughly for the exam, which meant that they could really come in first place. But something was bothering Vikir. He felt a sense of emptiness near his collar for some reason, and upon touching his collar, Vikir finally noticed what this dreadful feeling he was having. His eyes were opened wide in shock as he started to look for something. He quickly zooms into a black ball on top of the monster corpse that was closest to him. Upon zooming in, he could see that baby Madam was still happily eating away at the poison of the ant monsters. Her face was filled with complete joy as she ate as much as she could. While Vikir was in full panic mode, he had lost the baby Madam to the exam arena. We ended off the last chapter with Vikir realizing that baby Madam was still in the arena while the exam is still ongoing. We could see her now happily taking in as much poison as her tiny body could handle. Vikir could only watch from the stands. Panic was written all over his face as he thought for sure that he had placed the baby Madam back into his jacket the moment the exam was finished. Seeing her in there now, he figured out that the baby Madam might have jumped back out because she wanted to eat more of the poison that was in the arena. He could even see that she had grown bigger in a short period of time. Baby Madam had even shed her body once. Seeing the way she was growing, she definitely was the baby of the original Madam Eight Legs. Since the exam was still ongoing, Vikir couldn't do anything about baby Madam since Tutor's group was still inside. Vikir could only hope that the presence of baby Madam wouldn't do anything to the exam, and that Tutor's group would be able to finish their exam without any trouble. Without skipping a beat, Tudor stabs through a monster easily with his spear, blasting it into multiple pieces. Seeing the good work that he was doing, the blonde hero couldn't help but strike a pose, basking in his good work over killing the monsters. Bianca, on the other hand, wasn't that impressed by his work, telling Tudor that he was needlessly wasting his energy, and that there wasn't any need to turn the ant monsters into pieces. Her comment was enough to annoy him. Pushing it even further, Bianca aims her bow at the incoming monsters, as Tudor tells her that he wanted to see how well her self-control is compared to his. Feeling confident about her skill, Bianca tells the blonde hero to watch carefully and see how the master gets it done. Sending a single shot of an arrow covered in her purple aura, it curves and bends through the air to get to the closest ant monster. Without any trouble, it penetrates the skull of the monster with ease. Tudor was actually impressed by Bianca's skill as he heads in to fight even more monsters. As he gains a new sense of competitive spirit, in order to not be outdone by Bianca, Sancho manages to slice a single ant monster with one blow from his axe. After being done with his side, he watches over the pair of them, confused about whether they were really enemies or friends. PG was actually watching their situation closely. He shouted at them that they had all strayed from their original positions and needed to fix it. In a mere few seconds, PG found the proper solutions. He tells Bianca that they didn't need to kill the ant monsters. Instead, he found it better if she was to just go after the joints in their front legs. For Tudor, PG wanted him to use a smashing attack when the ants disperse, as it would be more effective in the long run. For Sancho, PG's goal was for them to bring in the ant monsters closer instead of stopping them in the middle. The group were eager to follow PG's instructions without question, as they deemed his judgments better than theirs. The two boys excitedly went on to do as PG said, impressed by the young warrior. PG was happy to hear their compliments. After all, he didn't want to be a burden to the team, so he had worked hard, and was glad to see his hard work paying off. With their team combination and skill set, they believed that it was possible for them to set a new record amongst the first years. After some time, no more ant monsters were alive as the group tried to catch their breath again. The results of Tudor's group, Group 109, is a record of 19 minutes and 55 seconds, which makes them tied for first place amongst the first years. Grenouille was pissed off after seeing their score. As he called them idiots, he couldn't believe that a group which has commoners inside them would have the same score as his group. Tudor's group were also disappointed in their record. Bianca couldn't believe that they were tied for first place, while PG's soul was leaving his body, as they only needed one more second to be the best. Tudor was just glad that their score meant that he didn't have to run around the academy naked. As they were heading out of the arena, Bianca started to talk about their HP shield that blocks shock, realizing that they would have actually died if the exam turns out to be a real battle when their HP reaches 0. Sancho was actually excited. He told the group that one day he wanted to become a warrior who can last for an hour, just like President Dolores. It turns out that she was watching their group closely from the stands as well. She was happy about their results, knowing that they were a part of her club, and wondered how strong they were going to be in the future. But as she watches them get ready to leave the arena, the announcer suddenly told everyone that Phase 1 of the exam has ended, which concludes the end of the first year exclusive monsters, and that right now Phase 2 will now begin. The second year exclusive monsters will now appear. Hearing that, Dolores was immediately alarmed by what was going on. It turns out to be a problem, as more ants, stronger than before, had appeared in the arena before Tudor's group could leave. Everyone from the stands, including Vikir and Grenouille's group, were all shocked to see what they were witnessing. Tudor's group was the most shocked as they gathered all together, all confused by what was going on, as more ants were coming out again, when they thought the exam had finished already. Tudor, seeing that the situation was getting worse, orders his group to be careful, as the physical damage they received from this moment on was going to be real. Their chances of seeing God was more than 0%. As they braced themselves for the upcoming deathmatch, Tudor reminds them that they only need to hold their ground until the school steps in. In the magic control room where the exam was being controlled from, the professors were all in a state of panic after realizing what was going on. The students in the arena had their HP reduced to 0, but the exam was still going on. Seeing that the students were first years, the professors demanded to know who allowed Phase 2. Analyzing the situation, one of the professors could see that aside from the students trapped in the arena, the system could detect a strong life force with them, which may have led to an error. The professor was monitoring the situation closely. Knowing that all signs of life should have been gone, the normal suit's HP the students were wearing reached 0. But for some reason, in their system, it was showing them that there was a presence overflowing with life who is still able to fight. As the professors were trying to get a grasp of the situation, Dolores barges into the room, informing them of the problem in the exam. She demanded of the professors that they needed to save the students who were inside the arena. But all they did was look at one another, telling Dolores that they were just the people who manage the waves that go in the exam, and that it wasn't their responsibility to check the program's reaction to life. Soon enough, the professors started to ignore Dolores's presence. Instead, they were discussing amongst themselves about the fastest way to save the formation. But all of them weren't taking action, as they needed permission from the higher-ups first to do anything. So instead, they argued to break the magic wall down quickly, but then they would need a key in order to do so. One of the professors had a key, but it was impossible to break the magic wall with just one key. It turns out that another professor had an additional key, but in the midst of the chaos, she had gone to the bathroom, and now they couldn't contact her at all. Dolores finally bites her lower lip in anger as she could see that the professors were incapable of doing anything to save the students who were facing death in the arena. Just outside the magic control room, Vicier was seen sitting near the window. He was listening closely to what was going on amongst the professors. It turns out to be an error in the magic equipment used in the exam. He thought about how during his own test, the system couldn't detect any reaction to life, which means that the magic stones used could only sense life after baby Madam had eaten the poison and grew. Looking back at the arena, Vicier wasn't sure if it was because of the error, but the poison fog from within was spreading at an alarming rate. If they didn't hurry up, Tudor's group would be unsavable. Looking for a way to help, Vicier was quick to spot something with his sharp eyes. There were holes that were created for air circulation, but the hole was too small for a human to fit in. But now he had another trick up his sleeve. Back at the stands, the students were moving around in a mess. Sinclair was clueless about what was going on, and thought that some group had set a better record than her team. As she wandered around, she suddenly screamed as something fast and small bumped into her. Falling onto the group, the nearby students that were around her noticed something fast moving on the ground. Turning back to see what it was, Sinclair was left confused, as she saw a puppy carrying a pair of pants. Back in the magic control room, somebody was smacking the magic crystal repeatedly, while the professors were too stunned to do anything. They were shocked to see that President Dolores was wielding a sword and swinging it towards the magic crystal relentlessly. Two professors immediately grabbed onto her arms, stopping her from hitting the magic crystal, as they explained to her that it was an ancient out-of-place artifact which was very precious and expensive. But Dolores didn't care about its worth, as she knew that she needed to stop the magic connection between the magic stone and the arena in order to save Tudor's group. But the professors still didn't allow her to do so, reminding the president that if she breaks the magic crystal, then it wouldn't end with her expulsion. They would also request compensation from the Quo Vadis family. Ignoring their threats and uselessness, Dolores remains focused in order to save Tudor's group, as she was willing to do anything. Back in the arena, PG gets knocked out by a massive ant monster. Its strike was enough to knock him out completely unconscious, as his eyes turned white from the pain and impact. The group could only shout at him as he went flying far behind. They tried their best to wake him up as the poison fog started to spread even faster. The remaining members of the group were soon faced with a massive shadow that towered before them, as a horde of huge ant monsters were right in front of them. Tudor, who still hasn't become a hero, realizing that he might die in vain right here and right now. It didn't take long for the ant monsters to land a hit that destroyed Tudor and Sancho. Bianca couldn't do anything to help her team as she stood frozen in fear. The massive shadow was now cast upon her. Trying her best to hold in her tears, Bianca couldn't believe that this was going to be her final moment. She didn't want to die like this. As the attack was coming, she closed her eyes. As she did, a figure with red glowing eyes appeared in the poison fog. With a fist covered in red aura, Vikir makes his appearance inside the arena, sending the ant monster to hell by blowing it up into multiple pieces, saving Bianca's life in the process. Even though the ant's attack didn't land on her, the force of Vikir's punch was enough to slowly knock her out, as she wondered how it was possible for him to be here. Vikir stood alone in the arena, completely shirtless, as his body was covered in old scars. With a determined look on his face, Vikir assures Tudor's group that nothing else was going to happen to them.
In the previous chapter, a situation was developing in the arena. placing the lives of the students within it in danger. As a result, in order to save them, Dolores immediately grabbed onto a sword and readied herself to smash the crystal that controlled the arena. But the teachers in charge quickly held onto her, begging the student president not to break it as she struggled against them. As they continued to struggle against one another, a teacher somewhere else in the room informed them that there was one more entity inside the arena. The teachers were shocked to see that someone had entered the arena by breaking through the magic wall and even killed one of the killer ants. Looking at the globe which showed what was inside, they could only wonder what was going on now. Back in the arena, Tudor's entire team had been knocked out and were lying on the ground, covered in green gas. Only Vicier was standing, shirtless as he flexed his arm against the enemies that harmed his friends. Using his bloodhound eyes to scan the area, he found where Madame was hiding, reminding her of his family motto, "Where beasts who cannot be tamed will die." In rage, Vicier warns her that he was going to punish her for her mistakes later on, but for now, he needed her to eat all the surrounding poison and to protect his friends on the ground. Once again, the little Madame became a vacuum, opening her tiny mouth and sucking in all the poison around the area. As Vicier watches over her, a killer ant approaches him, towering over the hero before trying to unleash something upon him. But before anything could happen, Vicier had already jumped to the height of its head, and with a single kick, he ripped the killer ant in half. The teachers who were monitoring the situation inside the arena were shocked to see a sudden reaction happening. As soon as he killed one of the ants, Vicier remembered that there was something here that could detect life energy. Preparing himself for more kills, he recalls that an 18-year-old should be around a mid-level sword expert, so there would definitely be an uproar if the school finds out that he was a graduator. Looking at the killer ants before him, he knew that these dummy golems were created to be the same as real-life monsters. Adding these facts, Vicier decides to use the raid techniques for killer ants that he had used in his past life, with the arsenal of weapons he picked out from Tudor's team. Armed with new weapons and his past life knowledge, Vicier was ready to fight as a high-level sword expert. The first fact he knew about killer ants was the petiole, the joint that connects the head and the thorax, which is the ant's weakness. With a single throw of the axe using precise aiming, Vicier easily lands his attack, destroying the killer ant's biological compass with ease. With their biological compass all gone, the killer ant's spatial awareness disappears, and they start to walk backwards. Using his bow and arrow this time, Vicier knew that they had another weakness. Their skulls are divided into two parts, and their joints that were there are the size of his pinky finger. The exoskeleton there was not as tough as compared to the other places on their bodies, allowing for a single arrow to destroy them. After firing that single shot, Vicier backflips into the air and towards the horde of monsters, holding a spear in his hand. He zigzags through them, cutting the ants into pieces without a single scratch on his body. But something else stopped him in his tracks. A huge shadow was casted over our boy as he looked at his new opponent. He couldn't believe that it came out for this test, a different variation of the killer ants, an ant general. Bigger and badder than the ones from before. Instead of feeling afraid, Vicier was excited. The bloodhound in him was awakening as he decided to go with what he's best at, a sword. The students who were watching the test were all confused about what was going on as they couldn't see anything that was happening inside. Back at the room, the teachers were shocked to see something else happening. One of them reported to the others that the ant general in the test had been defeated, and all examinees inside were doing fine. Professor Snape was shocked to learn that the ant general had been defeated. He knew that it was a golem that the academy students would not be able to defeat. It was made for fun in order to place the overconfident students in their places, and tough enough for the students to withstand it for an hour. As Snape thought to himself about how it could be defeated, another teacher barges into the room, shouting out that he had found where Professor Sadie is, who held the B key. The teachers were mad, asking where he found her, and it turns out that he had found her at a nearby alley bar where the owner was complaining about how she was vandalizing and destroying his business. Instead of being angry at her, Dolores quickly reminds them to hurry up and open the magic wall that was trapping the students inside the dome. With the missing professor finally found, the teachers were able to open the magic wall, releasing the poisonous gas inside. The incident during the Academy's midterms came to an end after the magic wall was lifted. Emergency services from the school took 42 minutes and 13 seconds. The teachers that went inside were stunned to see that all the ants had been defeated. Dolores rushes in as well, immediately ignoring the corpses of the dead monsters and begins her search for the students, but as she looked, she came across something that left her stunned. It turns out that she had chanced upon Vikir, who laid on the ground unconscious, surrounded by corpses of the killer ants, making her wonder how he was in here. Vikir was acting. He knew that what he was doing was sloppy, but this was the best choice. He had to act like he fainted while fighting with the others. Seeing the other students coming in was troublesome for the young hero, but he was still satisfied, since he didn't lose any of the future heroes in this incident. Taking the chance, the vice president whips out her camera, taking a candid photo of Vicier on the ground to use in the student paper. An article was written about him. To save his peers, a hero was born during Colosseo Academy's midterms. The truth behind Vicier's heroic deeds, although he fainted, is a statement from the young man who says that what happened is the outcome that was created by combining the power of him and his friends. The actions of a humble hero. He was flooded with compliments. Vicier, who became a hot topic for being handsome, got his mana rank re-evaluated as a high-level sword expert. The head of the Monster Research Center raises suspicions, saying it's impossible for a high-level sword expert to defeat an ant general. But Vicier explained that he knew the killer ants possessed a vital point on their skulls. Due to Vicier exposing the secret behind the killer ants, it was predicted that the mortality rate of Imperial soldiers would decrease. As a result, the Crown Prince awarded Vicier with a certificate. With all these stories about him, the people of the Academy could only wonder, who is Vicier, this year's hot star? As the titles come to an end, Vicier rips up the newspaper in his hand. Sitting on the roof of the building, he lets out a deep sigh. He couldn't believe that the quiet student life he planned to have was ruined now and was becoming more troublesome. Baby Madam was celebrating on his behalf, happily jumping on his shoulder as Vicier reminded her that this wasn't something to celebrate. Even after what happened, Vicier was glad that the others were still safe in the end, just as an owl appeared near him. Leaning on his arm, he could see that it was Cindy's regular report. The small piece of paper wrote, 10 elite corpses, information acquired, need about 1 month's time to analyze. Night hounds, copycats have appeared. One is doing it out of glorification, the other's intentions are unknown. The Baskerville family's Osiris is currently away from the estate, assumed to be heading to the imperial capital where you are. Last point is that the Academy's first-year students are hiding their royal bloodline. Seeing the information about the 10 elite corpses, Vicier could feel that Cindy had found a clue as she was being careful by her approach since she needed 1 month's time. Thinking about his fight with one of the 10 elite corpses previously, Vicier knew that he had only defeated him easily with the help of the Saintess's power. But he needed to hunt them down on his own, so he decided that for the next month, Vicier was going to upskill himself diligently. Thinking about the copycats. He was worried about them before, but now there were 2 of them. It will be bad if they catch the palace's attention or if their actions overlap. Vicier needs to look into this issue more. There was also news regarding how Osiris Le Baskerville had left the Baskerville estate, and now there was a possible chance that a royal family member was staying in the Academy. Vicier didn't even ask Cindy to tell him about the last bit of news, but he knew that she did it just for the fun of it. Using his aura, Vicier burns the report in his hand after memorizing the bits of it. As soon as the ashes of the report disappeared into the night sky, another voice was heard, telling Vicier that she didn't expect to meet the Academy's hero on this roof at this time. Sinclair has appeared, with a gentle smile on her face. She calls their meeting fate. As she sat down beside him, Vicier observed her closely. He knew her as a person who was diligent and talented. She was evaluated as someone who possesses all the talents in the world, and with outstanding grades, she was able to keep her rank of being the Fire Corps' finest student. But seeing her here in the middle of the night, Vicier wonders what exactly would someone like her be doing here right now. Sinclair reveals to him that she comes to this place to see the Milky Way whenever she was feeling down and didn't expect to see our boy here. Sneaking a peek at Vicier, Sinclair wonders if she would be able to see him here the next time she comes, while Vicier was thinking that he needed to change the location where he meets Cindy. Striking up a conversation, she reminded him that he was currently the talk of the academy, which Vicier didn't want to know about, but still, she tells him not to be embarrassed as great interest follows those who are incredible. She starts to list out Vicier's achievements so far, from coming in first in theory, to writing 3 to 4 research papers that turned the academic world upside down. Adding on the fact that he is known as a commoner, an irregular and now a high-level expert. Vicier has become someone who puts his peers to shame. But even after hearing about all his glorious achievements, Vicier held a dark expression on his face, whispering that grades were insignificant and that they were nothing to be bothered about. Because he knew that all these things, from money, power, and honor, would soon be meaningless. When the world falls, all order will collapse and an era of survival will begin. While thinking about the past, Vicier was brought back to the present when Sinclair mentioned that he talks like he had lived for a long time, just like an old man would. Sensing her good instincts, Vicier decides to pivot as she asks him about what he was doing after midterms. He answers that he was doing his backs and legs. Sensing that she was being shut down, Sinclair was left speechless. While Vicier thought about her, he knew that she was hiding a lot of things. Before he regressed, Sinclair was a commoner who graduated without losing her top student rank once. After that, she cut off all contact with the world and disappeared from history. It was as if she disguised herself as a commoner like him. Which made him think that the royal who was hiding their identity, as per what was written in Cindy's letter, must be her. The next day, we see Tutor stretching his body as he complains about how long the exam period has been, but he was glad that if they finish their attack exam today, then their midterms are done. Because of the accident during the defense exam, they gave them special considerations for sustaining injuries, so the exam schedule was delayed, which is why it felt so long. Tutor was still upset over his bet with Granui as it ended up in a stalemate. Instead, Tutor had found out who he needed to set as his new rival, which meant he gained a lot from the exam. Hearing that, the rest of the boys started to tease Vicier about how he hid his skills from them, but were grateful that he saved them from being injured too much, and that he was a high-level expert. He turns around to remind them that he didn't deal with the monsters by himself, but all the boys could hear was his modesty. Changing the topic, the boys brought up the news that the Night Hound had committed another terrorist attack. PG pulls out a paper from his bag, telling them that the students at Varangian Drill Hall were hurt by the Night Hound. He continues to read the paper about how the students found the Night Hound, and while they were trying to restrain him, the students were harmed. As the boys tried to make sense of the problems caused by the Night Hound, Vicier stood by himself at the back, thinking that this was the doing of the copycat again. Now that he has 2 copycats, he knows that one of them hasn't committed any crimes recently, but the number of crimes the other one has committed is gradually increasing. The problem is, safety precautions against the Night Hound may become stricter. If that happens, it could affect his future assassinations. Vicier decided that after he had finished his exams, he was going to get rid of the copycats. We changed the venue to the Colosseo Academy's attack exam area. Unlike the defense exam, which required the teamwork of a group of 4 students, the attack exam is an exam where individual ability is measured. It will proceed with a one-on-one match between a professor and a student, and points will be given whenever the student lands fatal blows and evades the attacks of the golem controlled by the professors. The motive behind this exam is for the students to go up against golems emulating the professor's movements and gain practical experience from fighting stronger people. However, This exam's critical flaw is that one professor can only take care of 50 students at a time. In other words, the standards of the students' exam evaluations will differ depending on the professor's specific fighting styles. In other words, the standards of the students' exam evaluations will differ depending on the professor's specific fighting styles. Tutor is seen smashing through the exam golem with the tip of his spear. After defeating it once, he felt that the exam was doable. It turns out that the professor testing him was Snape, who remains unimpressed by his actions as he knew that the exam wasn't over as Tutor was soon surrounded by vines emerging from the grounds. But the vines were simply a distraction as the golem he destroyed soon returned, in a bigger and stronger form. Seeing the incoming punch, Tutor braces himself with his spear to take it on. But it turns out to be a fake as the golem kicks him in the ribs instead. One kick was enough to turn his pupils white as Tutor laid on the ground, gripping his stomach in pain. As the golem shrinks back to its original size, Snape gives him a lesson, reminding Tutor that mages can also use their feet and not only their fists. As he uses the golem to help the young warrior get back on his feet, he tells him that since his goal when it comes to fighting is to win, then no matter if he was a mage or not, he needed to use his hands, feet and even teeth to win. As Tutor slowly returns back to his seat, he thanks the professor for the lesson as it was revealed that his score was 35 points. Seeing that, Bianca was the first to be shocked by it, complaining that it was impossible for him to score higher than her since she scored 31 points herself. She continues to complain that the test was a setup and that a one-on-one fight is disadvantageous for an archer. Hearing that, Tutor couldn't believe that she was saying all that when she was the one who took all the individual points during the defense exam. In the midst of their talk, a familiar laugh catches their attention. Grenouille appears, sitting above them, declaring to Tutor that he was the superior one between them. Tutor reminds him that they both have 35 points when it comes to defense and attack exams. But Grenouille points out his single flaw, that was because his theory grade was higher than his. Dealing a deadly blow to the young warrior. Feeling hurt over how he lost to Grenouille, Bianca comforts him, since their theory professor was Vicier Mord, who was still lucky. Thinking about it, she knew that the others have Professor Sadie, who was known as a pathetic, drunkard professor who disappeared with the magic wall's B key. Their seniors have even described her as weird and unprofessional. The number one professor that all students should avoid. Hearing about all that, Tutor wonders how such a person was able to become an academy professor. Bianca tells him that she was a very skillful person, so when she's not working as a professor, she helps the authorities chase criminals down. Dangerous criminals like the Night Hound. Worried about the boys, Tutor wonders if they were going to be fine since they were all amazing and talented in their own rights. Which is why Bianca was worried. She gazed up into the sky, revealing that Professor Sadie was the last relative of a fallen marquis. She was apparently envious of talented students who come from a good family. The problem is that because of her envy, there was a rumor going around saying she completely destroys talented students. That rumor turns out to be true as a heel is being pressed into the skull of PG, who lays on the ground unconscious. Blood spilling everywhere. The students in a different exam room were horrified, wondering if this was really a test since another one of them had fainted. In the midst of chaos, the remaining students wanted to get out, but the door wasn't opening. Soon, they were shouting for another professor to come or for someone to save them from their situation. Professor Sadie was observing the situation with her feet still on PG's head, seeing how they were acting. She calls this year's students a bunch of cowards. It turns out that Sinclair had been beaten by her as she laid on the ground as well. Sancho was knocked out as well. All three of them had achieved 0 points in the exam. Holding her whip in her hand, Sadie thinks that continuing the exam would be a complete waste of time. Looking around, she spots a single student still remaining in front of her. Vikir was looking straight at her, his eyes underneath the thick glasses revealing his bloodhound aura. Not knowing who he was, Professor Sadie licks her lips and gets excited over how she was going to torment him and calls him forward.
Thanks for watching the latest part from the voice of Manhwa. Subscribe for more content and don't forget to comment below what you want to see in the future. Like and share for more.